So good morning and welcome to the May 19th, 2023 Sandak Transportation Committee meeting. And I will now call the meeting to order. And before we move forward, I'd like to ask our interpreter now to give instructions on how to access the interpretation. So Ruth, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. The following announcement is for remote participants, and I will repeat this message in English. Buenos días. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor, desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, que es el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular o tableta, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. To use the interpreting feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are located and click on the interpretation icon, the world. Then select your language. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone or tablet, please press the ellipses, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So let's go ahead and call roll and make sure we have a quorum. So I want to ask Francisca to confirm that we have a quorum and to call a roll call for attendance.
Thank you, Chair. North County Inland is absent. For South County, Councilmember Duncan.
Present.
For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
Here.
The County of San Diego is absent. For East County, Chair Shu.
Here.
Also for East County, Councilmember Mendoza. Here. For North County Coastal, Mayor Kranz.
Here.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno.
Present.
For North County Transit District, Chair Edson.
Present.
The San Diego County Regional Airport Authority is absent. For the Port of San Diego, Rafael Castellanos.
Here.
For Caltrans, Executive Director Delarda.
Here.
And also Ann Fox. And the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association is absent, and that completes the roll call, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. And I'd like to start this meeting today because it is Asian Pacific Islander Month to give recognition to all of the Asian American and Pacific Islanders who work here at Sandag, from maulers to engineers to accountants to those who make sure that we have policies to help us with equity issues. So I want to thank all of them and recognize all of our employees here at Sandag and for this month to give recognition to the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who work here at Sandag. So with that, let's move on to public comment. Do we have any public commenters? And we have a long agenda, so I should have warned staff ahead of time. If we can go with 2 minutes for public comments. So Francesca, do we have any public commenters for general comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a few public commenters on this item. First in the room, we'll go to Timothy Bylash, and then we'll go to the folks online and start with Alex Wong.
Good morning, Transportation Committee. First, let me thank the chair and the committee for your continued efforts, and particularly in highlighting the dangers of health issues for particulate matter. My name is Dr. Timothy Bylash. I'm a board-certified OBGYN, but I also have trained in science and have done research for that. So I offer these comments in that context. I make a plea because I've been at several meetings this week, and I had a soon-to-be mother and her husband, and I had this accidental discussion, who lives downtown near J Street, I believe it is. And she's concerned when her baby is born that she can't walk down the street. And she's concerned because the streets are not clean. And so sometimes I think we just make things so complicated that if the streets are dirty, we need to clean them. So we need to find a way. And I make an appeal to the city itself, because this is what they talked about. But Sandag is involved in a lot of projects that may touch on that. We need to provide public bathrooms. That was the #1 thing I heard again and again this week. And if you're really concerned about having a shining city, that might be a help. But the other thing is to budget for sanitation and cleaning. If there's garbage on the street, we need to pick it up. And they talked about having dirty cities and feces matter, and they don't want to bring their child. And on AM radio, I am hearing it out the wazoo in terms of avoiding cities now. So I think that might be an important thing. And I ask you to identify the issues, then address the issues, but don't give them to someone else and pretend like you're doing something. So again, thank you, Transportation Committee and Chair. I really appreciate you taking my comments.
I think our next speaker will be Alex Wong, who will be followed by the original draw.
It's time to upgrade our busiest bus corridors into bus rapid transit. Oakon and University Boulevard are home to most of the busiest bus lines in the county. Riders deserve a better experience than to get stuck in the same traffic as cars. Implementing dedicated bus lanes, traffic signal priority, off-board fare payments, and on-board boarding to routes like the 215 and the 201, 202 would therefore benefit the most riders possible in a largely low-income area. Bus rapid transit doesn't just shorten vehicle times, it also reduces wait times because by speeding up end-to-end trip times, MTS would provide more frequency even with the same number of buses, since it takes less time for buses to cycle through the route. MTS would also save money by picking up more passengers per hour for the same cost. Transit signal priority should be the first course of action in speeding up bus routes, as it's fast and cheap to implement, requiring virtually no physical infrastructure. Signal priority on Broadway and C streets could also shave off 5 minutes of Blue and Orange Line trip times. This would benefit every passenger traveling through downtown on the county's busiest transit routes. Flagship rapid routes like the 215 and the 201, 202 need median bus lanes, which, unlike curb-adjacent bus lanes, are free of illegally parked cars and cars making right turns. Off-board fare payments and on-board boarding would reduce dwell times, which are a huge cause of delay on busy routes. It would also be easy to implement. Simply putting a card reader at every rapid station would cost peanuts, considering that the entire Pronto system costs under $3 million annually to maintain. Best of all, off-board fare payments and on-board boarding should not face opposition, as it would not take away existing space from motorists. Sandag can and should expand rail transit, But before building new rail lines, Sandag should first speed up existing lines. Signal priority, off-board fare payments, and lanes are the low-hanging fruits. They're cheap and fast to implement and will benefit passengers now rather than in 20 years.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be the original draw.
Just curious how many of you guys biked to work yesterday? Probably won't get that answer. But as the gentleman who was first speaking was saying, I don't understand why you wouldn't budget sanitation and cleaning for, the county or wherever transit is. MTS is wasting tens of like $250,000 on $10,000 trash cans. And people don't even have a place to go to the bathroom. So I don't even understand why it's like everyone always wants to pass the buck on to someone else. This is their problem. This is their problem. We don't really deal with that. But these people who are driving and or using public transit are having health issues because there's no restrooms. And, people are frivolously spending money on, trash cans that are solar, but I mean, do they even work when the sun's not out? I mean, the money isn't being spent to actually fix things like the sanitation and stuff. I mean, is it getting passed through the line? Like, this isn't our problem. It's like, say, a store owner, their problem. Millions and billions of dollars get spent to, do certain things, but other things get left out. And it's really disturbing when, we claim to want, I mean, if you want people to be out on the streets walking and biking, then you should provide a condition in those areas that is conducive to that, and not just kind of go, well, we don't have money for that, or it's not our problem. And especially the bathroom thing. I mean, people should not be having to have major health conditions just to work for the transit system. So, and or just to use it. So, I mean, I think you guys need to think about things, and when you're spending money in what you're doing, it's.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the public commenters.
Thank you. Let's see, are there any comments from committee members? Oh, Caltrans, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair
Leonardo.
Chu. I wanted to thank everyone that participated yesterday in Bike Anywhere Day. We had a pit stop in our district office in Old Town, and we had over 120 people that were biking stop and ask questions, get hydrated. So we were happy to talk to those people about the current network for active transportation, but also future plans for active transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee members? If not, we'll move on to agency reports, and we have Antoinette Myers for that.
All right, good morning. Colleen Clemenson is on a well-deserved vacation, so I'm going to give the agency report today. There's been a lot of activity since your last meeting, so quite a few things to update you on, starting with Bike Anywhere Day. Thank you, Gustavo, for the shout out there. Historically, this event has been called Bike to Work Day, but we recognize a lot of people work from home. There are folks who are retired, students who want to participate. So this year, we made it Bike Anywhere Day, and we got a lot of great feedback from participants about the inclusivity of the new name and the event. We had asked people to take the pledge online and let us know that they would be participating in the event, and we had 3,650 pledges, which is great. Of those, 30% were actually first-time participants, so this is a really high number. There were 100 pit stops that we hosted around the region, and at those pit stops, and the initial count shows 7,570 bike riders who picked up T-shirts and other goodies. 11 elected officials from 8 cities came out to their neighborhood pit stops, so thanks to all of you for really supporting this event. And then, overall, the event was one of the most successful events that we've had, and we really look forward to continuing to grow this in the future. Earlier this week, the California Transportation Committee held their regular meeting. It was in San Francisco. Sandag Senior Planner Andrea Hoff presented a white paper that we produced on zero emission freight transition at the border. The CTC also identified savings from previous ATP, the Active Transportation Grant Program projects, and they've redirected some of that money to fully fund projects that had only received partial funding allocations previously. So we're happy that the Howard Bikeway project will receive $8.137 million, which is an increase of $6.741 million over the original award. And then the construction allocation for Sandag's Inland Rail Trail Phase 4 project was on the agenda for $1.236 million. And the knowledge and expertise of Sandag staff were really recognized throughout the state at the event. On Tuesday, our CEO and the rail program manager, Danny Vea, testified on the Low-Sand Rail Corridor resiliency at the Senate Transportation Subcommittee in Sacramento. They briefed the committee on our previous bluff stabilization work in San Diego County, as well as the San Diego realignment project and study. The $100 million Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program State Grant Award that we received will definitely go a long way towards construction of the San Dieguito Double Track Phase 2. And we've been working very hard to make sure that the region is successful in receiving a federal grant for another $130 million to fully fund that construction. I just wanted to recognize that this is National Infrastructure Week, and on Wednesday, the president declared today, May 19th, National Defense Transportation Day. And in terms of other priority projects, the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry is continuing to make significant advancements. Sandag staff traveled to DC recently to meet with senior officials from DOT, CBP, and the GSA about OME. And the purpose of the trip was really to provide details on the financing plan and to secure an agreement to advance the design process. So we had productive discussions, and it is our hope to get the green light to move forward soon. And then finally, I wanted to share that Sandag's been invited to the UN Habitat General Assembly in Kenya next month. And our board chairwoman, Nora Vargas, will represent the agency as part of the US delegation. The delegation will showcase US diplomacy, promote good governance and comprehensive collaborative approaches to housing and urban development. We'll share our model of collaboration with the 18 tribal nations and Mexico. Hassan has also been invited to the Metropolis World Congress and Urban Summit event in Brussels. So that concludes the agency update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Francisca. Do we have any public comments on the report?
Thank you, Chair. We have no comments on this. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one comment on this report. The original draw, you can go ahead.
Man, you guys, just the fact that you're engaging with the UN like this, I mean, and Nori's going to go and represent this. They have, I mean, are you guys, because it could go either way. You could either know about the agenda of the UN and you're doing this and you're trying to act ignorant, or you don't know what's going on and that the UN has a global agenda to take over the world and you guys are engaging in every bit of it, which is treason. Like when you're supposed to be doing stuff, you should not be engaging with an entity that is usurping all the rights of the people. I mean, it's the whole sustainability climate action plan. That's the whole plan, and it comes and it stems from there. I mean, the idea is to put us in 15-minute cities. Are you guys clueless of that, or are you doing this intentionally to put us there, just pretending like you don't really know what you're doing? But it's a very dangerous path to go down, what you guys are doing to put people into 15-minute cities where you got to get a permit if you want to go outside of that and visit your family. Like, this isn't a joke. And the more you guys talk about the UN openly like that, I mean, it's like a slap in the face, because you're basically engaging with an entity that you shouldn't be. And you guys act like it's so great, but it's not what the people want. You're basically enslaving them, and we're paying you to do it. You're using our own money to enslave us. So I would like to know, I'd like an answer to know if you guys actually know about the UN agenda and you're doing this intentionally, or if you're ignorant of it. Because you're supposed to work for the people. And when you're doing this kind of stuff and I'd like an answer to that.
Okay, that concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions from commissioners? Seeing none, we can move on to item number 3, which is the consent agenda. Unless there are any members or comments or questions on the minutes, Do we entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar? So made by Moreno,
Second.
second by Duncan. So Francesca, do we have any public comments? If not, let's go ahead and take a vote on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Chair. We do have one public comment actually on this item. The original draw, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like an answer. All of you are sitting there being quiet. I'd like an answer about the UN. I don't know why it's that hard. You could just say no.
Right.
You could just say yes. It's very simple. But the fact that you're just sitting there like, we don't have any comment, that's all people need to know is watching you and your reaction when you're asked such a question like that. That is a simple yes or no. That's all I'm going to say about that.
The original draw because we have a comment on the report from the agency. And with regards to public comments, we're
Oh, I got that.
we're not allowed to really make comments on non-agendized items. So do you have any other comments on the report from Sandag? Or I'm sorry, the minutes. If not, we'll go ahead and take a vote on the consent calendar.
Thank you. And that motion does pass with 6 yeses and 1 abstention.
Thank you. We're going to go on to item number 4, access for all, cycle 2 call for projects. And we have Jenny Russo and Ben Gambler to make a presentation.
Good morning, Transportation Committee. My name is Jenny Russo. I'm the Grants Program Manager here at Sandag. So before we get into Ben's presentation, I just wanted to provide a quick update for you. As you may recall, this committee has considered funding recommendations for 2 of our grant programs in the last several months. And as a result of those discussions, there were some questions asked about the process that we use to evaluate our applications and distribute grant funding. So because of that, we are working with our data science team to conduct a peer review panel of the process that we use, benchmarking against best practices that are out in our region, as well as across the state and across the country. And we're going to consider some of the things that are shown here on this slide. We hope we're in the early stages of that process, but we hope to bring those funding or that result back to this committee sometime later this summer. So just want to give you a brief update on that. And I will now turn things over to Ben for his presentation.
Thank you, Jenny. Good morning, members of the Transportation Committee. Today, I am bringing the Access for All Cycle 2 call for projects before you to discuss proposed program changes in eligibility and evaluation criteria for your consideration. So before we talk about the AFA program, I'll start with the current climate that's existed leading up to its adoption. We're all familiar with on-demand transportation or ride-hailing services offered through transportation network companies or TNCs, such as Uber or Lyft. These services are typically offered by a smartphone application, and trips are fulfilled within 24 hours of request. TNCs are regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC. Across California, there's a growing need for TNCs to provide equal access to individuals with disabilities, especially wheelchair users who need a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, or WAVE. Currently, most WAVE services are only available through specialized transportation providers or through paratransit services, but these services all follow either a fixed route or schedule and are not on demand. To address the lack of accessibility of WAVE services statewide, in 2018, Senate Bill 1376 created the TNC Access for All program. This legislation directed the CPUC to establish a program to improve accessibility of TNC services for individuals with disabilities, especially those requesting WAVE service. When a TNC trip is provided, a 10-cent fee is collected and deposited in the CPUC's Access Fund. A portion of these funds are then distributed by the local Access Fund Administrator, or LAFA, in each county. Now, Sandag is the LAFA for San Diego County and is required by the CPUC to distribute Access Fund monies through an annual competitive process. Sandag's Access for All grant program was created in 2022 with the first call for projects issuance. Cycle 1 AFA services will begin in June of 2023. The CPU has strict eligibility requirements for this program. Applicants must be able to provide or contract with an entity that provides on-demand wave transportation services in the county. On-demand wave transportation is defined as the provider that can fulfill trip requests for wheelchair users within 24 hours through a service that does not follow a fixed route or fixed schedule. Additionally, applicants must be transportation providers or carriers that can hold a CPUC-issued charter party carrier permit or be a non-permitted transportation carrier that can meet the permit requirements mentioned in the report. The AFA Cycle 1 call for projects and CPUC guidelines and eligibility have informed the development of Cycle 2. In addition, feedback we've received from specialized transportation stakeholders in the region has helped to provide valuable insight into how we can make changes to improve this funding cycle. When bringing Cycle 1 funding recommendations to the Transportation Committee last November, we raised the possibility of changing the funding structure for future funding cycles to allow for more applicants to the program in response to a small number of applicants in Cycle 1. Since then, one of the positive developments from the stakeholder feedback we've heard on Cycle 2 proposals has been hearing more voices from the disability community about how the program can improve specialized transportation service in the region and address their needs more directly. Did I go too far? Sorry about that. There are a number of specialized transportation providers who offer services for individuals with disabilities in the region, and several of them have shown interest in starting on-demand service with AFA funding. We want to create a framework that allows more providers to apply for Cycle 2 funding. The feedback from the disability community included asking for more new service providers in the region, or in the program, sorry. We want to encourage existing and new providers who are interested and able to provide on-demand services to submit applications for different models of service at different scales. However, we recognize that for entities that are new to providing specialized transportation, including wave service, competing against current providers who have more experience and resources to apply for funding can be challenging. We want applicants to compete on a more even playing field. Now, to address these barriers to service, we are proposing splitting funding into two categories that allow for a greater diversity of funding and applicants, with the majority of funding going toward existing providers and a smaller amount of funding for new providers. Funding would be made available to existing specialized transportation providers who could provide on-demand wave service in a larger service area, such as a regional service. A separate funding allotment would be dedicated to new specialized transportation providers who could provide on-demand wave service for smaller scale pilot type projects with the potential to grow if successful. We're presenting several Cycle 2 funding options for you to consider, which can be found in Attachment 1. Staff is recommending Option 1 to provide a reasonable amount of funding for new wave providers to develop service, while also encouraging partnerships and coordination of services among existing specialized transportation providers through the existing provider category. Option 1 also represents a reasonable middle ground between splitting funding evenly, as shown in Option 2, and the combined funding model shown in Option 4, which resulted in a small number of applicants in Cycle 1. Option 3 proposes that 90% of total funding go to existing providers, which would leave new providers with significantly less funding and could limit the number of new provider applicants. A good starting point to thinking about these options may be to consider whether you would want to see an increased number of new and existing providers applying for the program. If you prefer this scenario, you'd likely be favoring options 1 through 3. Within those options, you'll want to consider if an option provides sufficient funding for new and existing providers. We believe that option 1 provides the sufficient funding for both new and existing providers. Now, under our proposal, each funding category would have a set of evaluation criteria used to score project applications, which can be found in attachment 2 and are summarized on this slide. For the existing providers category, changes were made to the criteria used in cycle 1 based on stakeholder feedback we received and are shown in attachment 1. The new providers category are based on the updated existing providers criteria with additional changes shown on the slide in maroon. After today's meeting, we'll take your recommendations to the Board of Directors for consideration. Following that, we anticipate opening the Cycle 2 call for projects in June, starting a 90-day application period. The call for projects will close in the fall, followed by the review of applications, including scoring by our evaluation panel. Later in the fall, we anticipate bringing the funding recommendations for this committee and the board to consider. As we go into the winter, we'll begin post-award activities, beginning with a start of service for Cycle 2 grantees. So I'm just going to read the recommendations at this point. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the actions requested are that the Transportation Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve the Cycle 2 Access for All grant program call for projects evaluation criteria identified in attachment 2. And number 2, the Transportation Committee is further asked to recommend that the Board of Directors adopt the option 1 funding categories identified in attachment 1. That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Let's go on to public comments on this, 2 minutes each.
Thank you, Chair. We do have several public comments on this item. We'll start with Abdi. You can step up to the podium when you're ready, and then go to Firas.
Good morning. My name is Abdi Karim Hussein. I'm the managing member of Elite Medical Transport here in San Diego County. I'm here today to support FACT. We have been partnering with FACT the past 7 years, and it has been a partnership that benefited both of us. Having a local broker that understands and knows the need of this community is very important. And for example, we have worked together for 7 years. So one of the most memorable partnership or things that we have done together was during the COVID, when everyone in this county was at home. We were on the field working, providing services to the needy elders. And FACT was out there with us, providing PPE equipment. And so basically I'm here to support. I hope that they can get a continued funding so that there's no gap in providing transportation to the locals. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Firas, who will be followed by Arun Prem.
Morning, everyone. My name is Firas Jassim. I'm from SD Bend Transportation in San Diego. I'm here also to support FACT. I've been working with FACT for over 2 years now. I've worked with about 6 transportation brokers in multiple, they work in multiple states. Honestly, FACT has been the best, as very reliable, and I've had almost 98% successful trips with no cancellations. And like Abdi said, we've been supporting San Diego, especially after COVID, transportation the elderly. So I'm here to support FACT again. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Our next speaker will be Arun Prem, followed by Abdi Karim Hussein.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Arun Prem, Executive Director of FACT, speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors of FACT. We are a partner with Sandag and recipient of the first cycle of AFA funds, and very excited about kicking off that service close to June 1st and keeping all of you informed and included in that process. In this instance, we believe that the proposal to split the AFA Cycle 2 funds into two separate grants, one for current wave service providers who are ready to provide services, and one for new wave services that are yet to be developed. This needs to be qualified further to meet the PUC's AFA program objectives, which the objective is to provide as many trips as possible with this funding as soon as possible. So that's the reason we're offering this friendly amendment to the Sandag proposal. The AFA Cycle 1 has not yet begun. I just mentioned June 1st as the start date, and we have no lessons learned from the actual operations. Therefore, to make a major change in the funding of the program at this time seems premature. FACT's business model is, I want to talk a little bit about that because we believe that it already accommodates Sandag's objective in proposing this change. FACT's business model accomplishes this objective of creating new wave capacity by doing several things which you just heard from the two taxi cab operators. I'll elaborate a little bit more. As the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, the CTSA, appointed by Sandag, FACT has been a long-term advocate and catalyst for building accessible services and special needs taxicab services infrastructure in San Diego County. Grant funds received by FACT are used for reimbursements for rides provided.
I'm so sorry, but your time has expired. So we do need to move on to the next commenter.
Thank you.
Next would be Abdi Karim Hussein, followed by Dan Tota.
He already spoke. We think he was.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Then Dan Tota, you're up next. And after Dan, we'll move on to the public commenters on Zoom and start with Lily Arani.
Good morning, Transportation Commission. I'm here to speak on behalf of FACT. FACT is a service that is essential in San Diego. It covers all of San Diego County. I ride paratransit, and they have a 3/4 mile pickup area. FACT doesn't have a 3/4 mile pickup area. So as I've been experiencing, less trips with FACT because of the funding cutting. But as for covering the areas of North County and all of San Diego County, FACT is the only company that covers the whole county. Julian, all the areas that the paratransit areas don't cover. And they need to have their funding so that we can get around. The disabled people, people that need to go to doctor's appointments, people for dialysis. FACT is essential for us in every way. And I hope you find the funding for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do have one additional public speaker in the room, George Maverick. You can step up to the podium. And then after George, we'll go to Lily Arani.
Yes, thank you, Sandag. The first thing I want to say is thank you for the past services from FACT. I'm on the top of a mountain, 6 miles away from the nearest bus stop, and they have come up and supported me in going to various places. I want to show my appreciation for that. And I hope you will continue to fund them because otherwise there's no other organization or whatever that will give us a ride. So again, I want to thank for the past services and that you'll continue to fund FACT. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lily Arani, who will be followed by the original draw.
Hi, my name is Lily Urani. I'm a professor at UCSD, but I'm actually here on behalf of a group of over 30 signatories, most of whom are wheelchair users. They go by the name San Diego Way for All. I wanted to thank SANDAG for its engagement with a disabled community that reached out to them after the AFA Round 1 grant. That community had meetings with several folks who are on the SANDAG board as well. And we can see that the staff has been trying to hear the feedback that this group had provided. So, on behalf of that group, we wanted to say that we strongly support option 1, in which there's grant funding provided for new providers. The gap that new providers are needed for is to have transportation that you can book less than 24 hours in advance. Like imagine you're in a wheelchair and your friends want to go to a concert. They find out they have tickets that day. 24 hours, with less than 24 hours, you can't really get a ride there in San Diego unless like public transportation goes there. And if public transportation is really slow in the later hours when that concert gets out, you're kind of stuck. Similar, I've had situations at work where my friend who was in a wheelchair couldn't go to after work events with people who were visiting from other places because they couldn't get, the bus couldn't get there, in shorter than 2 hours, while everyone else could jump in a car or Uber. We want to think about making transportation that's accessible for all. Uber and Lyft drivers can take out their phone and book a ride in 10 minutes and get to where they want to go. So that turnaround time on demand, that turnaround time needs to be same day, not book it 24 hours in advance. 24 hours in advance is not on demand. So to that, and I would like to suggest an amendment that the criteria for the new providers include on demand as being within 3 hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be the original draw, followed by Tony San Nicolas.
I guess I have a question as far as, is this money just going to develop these things? Because it seems like a lot of money just to be developing something. I'd like to know what the money goes for, because I think this is really important to provide this. I was paralyzed for 8 years. And so I was wheelchair bound, and I know what that struggle is like to get around. But a lot of the things you guys do are contradictory, because you're saying you need to provide as many trips as possible, but you also on this other back burner have a whole plan to not drive. So what are you going to do when you don't want people to drive? Or are these people going to have to get an electric vehicle in order to provide this transportation and get the funding? I just kind of wonder what hoops you're going to make these people jump through that are in line with your whole sustainability plan and no driving. I mean, because like you should be providing this, but if your plans contradict with each other, I just wonder, does this funding even really help any of these people? And maybe you need to even you don't need necessarily specific drivers for that. In a wheelchair, you can get into different vehicles. It doesn't necessarily have to be one that you that has a ramp, but you should be having people that would be able to help the people get into the vehicle and get out and do stuff with their chair. Although I know there are some that are electric, so those can't be folded or anything like that. But I just would hope that you would spend this funding to actually help people and not make people jump through so many hoops that these programs don't get in place and these people don't get the transportation they need, because they still have the need to get around and they deserve to have just as equitable of money spent on them.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Tony San Nicolas, and Tony will be our final speaker. Oh, I'm sorry. After Tony will be Blair Beekman, and Blair will be our final speaker.
Good morning. I am very honored to be here to talk about FACT. We have a long history with FACT. Renewing Life has a long history with them. And what we really want to acknowledge more is the fact that they lease out very good quality brand new vehicles. And those vehicles have been able to help us to replace vehicles that were older. They trained us. We started this ministry is what we call it. We started this ministry not really knowing everything that we needed to know, but FACT was a great tutor for us. Driving for FACT allows us to do other public drives. So it's not just the FACT share ride program. We're able to work with 3 other living senior facilities because we have a couple of buses. We can do shuttle trips. They gather together, and I just want you to know the seniors just they love it. They usually go just to socialize and then go shopping, and we're able to purchase vehicles, which now 4 of our vehicles are MTS certified with medallions. They have the organization called CAM, which educates not just Renewing Life, but many people in the industry. Also, I want to say just a short little thing. Their care for the providers is outstanding. They do care about how they're doing, and I just want to say that I received a condolence card because my dad passed away, and I didn't know they even knew it. But they sent me one, and it was very touching. So I have to mention that. But I too feel like option 1 should be the option that FACT receives. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thank you for seeing my hand. The concepts of ride sharing are really important. And I'd like to thank public comment from people like Lily Arani today. I know the Sandag board and many within Sandag have been really debating the issue and the future of ride sharing and what that could mean. And as it was also mentioned by a public comment person, a real good luck to yourselves how to be budgeting the future issues of rideshare and exactly in exploring what can be its future purpose and to expand its future purpose. I think it's an interesting concept, and many within Sandag are feeling that as well. A real good luck to ourselves in how to budget such ideas and concepts for as important and as good work as it already does. A real good luck in understanding how to look for new ways of ride sharing, and that it can be workable and feasible in different ways, and to budget that exploration discovery process that it can be done well and efficiently. I guess that's kind of the key right now, and it just I hope we don't have to be fighting about it and how to understand its good practices, and good luck on ourselves in how to better work on this issue. Thank you.
Chair, that concludes the public commenters.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our legal counsel, Betsy, to kind of clarify where we are in this stage of dealing with the criteria and these options.
Sure. I just wanted to put one thing on the committee's radar. We, in regards to the funding categories, which is the second part of this action item, if you look at the agenda, there are 4 options for the funding categories. One of those options is that existing providers and new providers would compete on an equal playing field for those funds. The other options have a certain pool of funds that are available for existing providers and another pool of funds that would be available to new providers. We have notified, or staff has notified the CPUC of these categories. We haven't received any concerns from the CPUC, but we are awaiting final confirmation that options 1 through 3 are authorized under their guidelines. So we just wanted to make the committee aware of that issue. The committee can make any recommendation, options 1 through 4, for the board to consider. We should get CPUC authorization or feedback in advance of the board meeting where this item will be considered. But I wanted to put that issue on the committee's radar. And if there are any questions, let me know.
Any questions to Betsy? If not, for our discussion and actions, we have 2 different ones, and I hope I'm advocating that we discuss the first one first and then take a motion and move on that before we go on to number 2, the different options that are presented to us. If that's okay, I'll ask Vice Chair Campillo to ask a comment. Yeah, you're going to have to either raise your hand or speak up, and I know Councilman Moreno, and Mayor Krantz wants to speak.
So Chair, you're only entertaining item 1 at the current point?
For
Item
discussion
4.1.
purpose, yeah,
Okay.
so that we can move along. So if we could discuss item 1 first on the criteria, I think it'd be easier before we go to item 2.
Understood. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Russo and Mr. Gembler, thank you very much for your hard work on designing these programs to provide grants to many worthy organizations. And thank you for the update at the top of the presentation about how we're looking into evaluator training and the consistency process. Thank you for taking our concerns seriously at our prior meetings and keeping us in the loop on that. The Access for All grant program is very important in our constituents' need and also expect on-demand services, and the law requires it under regulations from the CPUC. And looking at the criteria updates in the staff report in attachment 1, it's thorough, and the red line shows how we are adapting to community feedback and important concerns. I think it's very good that under category 4E in the operational implementation plan, we're going to be focusing on where applicants will be filling in gaps that have existed. So that's a strong addition. And that's also mirrored in category 6A under innovation. I do have questions on item 2, but Chair, with that, I'm very happy with the current design, the evaluation criteria as attached, as looking into these attachments. And when time comes, I'm happy to make a motion to support 4.1.
Thank you. Let's go with Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation and for all your work. Ms. Russo, I think Sandag is at the forefront and has been for a while in regards to state and federal grants. And I commend you for your hard work on that. I know when our new mayor came into office, I often pointed at Sandag as an example of grant writing for state and federal funds. I'm happy to support the motion on the floor. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been clarified. Actually, we'll have only 1 motion. So we'll divide up the discussion. So if you're okay with 1 motion.
I'm sorry. My understanding was 1 motion for I1 and then another motion for 2. So right now we're only speaking on 1.
Can we let's make the 2 motions if we can. Is that legally okay?
Certainly legally okay. If
Okay,
it worked for
so
production.
we'll make it two motions just to, and so that, I think it'll help the discussion go forward. So, Councilman Madsen. And then we'll go back to Pants.
I'll reserve my comments for number 2, but I do support the motion.
Thank you. Mayor Grants.
I have a question about the evaluation process. Who do you convene to conduct the evaluation?
So they are non-applicants first and foremost. So as long as someone did not apply or have an affiliation with an application in some way where they would receive funding downstream. And they are all folks, we're going to ask for volunteers. So they're folks that have expertise in the particular grant program. So in this case, it would be specialized transportation that we're looking for, but it can be anybody from the community as long as they're not connected to an application or have any kind of a conflict of interest related to that applicant or any of the applicants that are in the pool.
Will any of the writers be part of the evaluation process?
A writer could be part of the process, absolutely.
What in evaluating an applicant that is in the category of the goal to create new providers, it seems it would be a challenge for some of these, some of this criteria to be established very clearly, at least comparing them to an established provider. So I guess it's, the question to me would be how, in what way will the evaluation process be able to identify an organization that might be applying that has no track record and other things? Is it, how is it that the possibility of granting them this kind of money is going to be a good investment?
So, we want to really, like I talked about before, make sure that we have a really diverse group of people who are applying for this program. One of the concerns was that we didn't have enough applicants in cycle one. We will be in our call for projects and in our application, we'll be adding those features in for our call for projects that can sort of delineate and affirm that an applicant is providing, as a first-time specialized transportation provider. I'm not sure if that directly answers your question or what.
Well, somewhat. And, in the bifurcation of this item where we're looking at one, it mostly focuses on, my questions relate to the evaluation of a potential applicant in that category. And it leads frankly to item number 2, which is when you have this process where the potential for trying to find and encourage new applicants, and yet we have this item where we essentially hear from only one provider, not a potential provider. Nobody showed up from that category to speak today. And we have a lot of people that are vouching for the one provider that did show up today. It makes me wonder if we're, the approach, your staff recommendation that we use option 1, makes me wonder if maybe 4 is a better option, but we can get into that in the next item.
Any other comments on the first part of this item? If not, we can vote on the evaluation criteria as presented and whether or not to recommend. There was, it was seconded by Councilmember Moreno, right? Yeah, so it's moved by Campillo and seconded by Moreno. So that's on the first part of this, the criteria. Missing anyone?
The port button didn't register. If you wouldn't mind pressing it again. Whoever's voting for the port. Here.
Who's the port? Raphael? You? Great, thank you.
And that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Further discussion about the breakdown and the 4 options already presented. Councilmember Campillo, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So looking at the options, the funding options in attachment 1, my first question is the recommended 70-30 split. Could you explain the reasons why that was considered the optimal approach?
Yes. So we had originally looked at something closer to the second option. There were a variety of ideas that were put forward related to several of the other options on there. And we felt that we wanted to give sufficient funding for existing wave providers, but also we wanted to be able to have enough funding for startup costs for smaller, less experienced entities with less capacity. So part of this was, we felt this was a bit of a sort of meeting point or middle ground between some of those other options.
Understood. So, in looking at the bottom of the second page of attachment 1, the second funding category, essentially it's designed for smaller pilot projects. Is there a calculation on what a typical smaller pilot project costs that delivered a 70-30 split?
That's a very good question. Yeah, that is something that I think we're going to sort of find out more specifically depending on the nature of the application or proposal that's put forward. I know there have been past pilot projects that have been proposed that I think can be scaled up or down through the application process and discussion, and that will have an impact on ultimately if an eligible provider is funded and for what amount for a pilot project. But it does really provide a lot of flexibility, I think, and a lot of almost like a test case for addressing gaps in service and other things that we've mentioned before.
Understood.
Something I could add to that,
Please.
we do know from our other specialized transportation program, if somebody wanted to buy a vehicle, the typical price of a vehicle, a wheelchair accessible vehicle like a minivan, is usually around $100,000. So that was one consideration we made, is if you're a startup and you have nothing, that would be a one piece that you would obviously need to fund. Now, maybe they want to source that somewhere else, but that was the main sort of beginning factor, is what would it cost to purchase a vehicle? And then what does it take to operate that for? This is a 12-month period is typically what we're looking for. So there was some sort of estimation that went in there, but obviously we don't know. We're in the first year of this funding.
Understood. I guess my key concern is that without essentially a plan from outside folks who want to take on a pilot project, without a suggestion as to what the actual costs are going to be, and ultimately the CPUC mission of an Access for All program is to deliver as many rides as possible. It's hard to know, as you point out. It doesn't seem like there's too many folks clamoring to do these pilot programs at this moment and coming in and saying that actually it should be a 50-50 split because we are ready to take on 5 vehicles or 2 vehicles or 1 vehicle, right? So given all of that, I think that in order to avoid leaving money on the table for potential new providers that don't in essence have a plan in place coming to us to explain what they need, I think optimizing the existing providers who do provide good service and ultimately aiming at achieving what the regulations of the AFA program at a state level are designed to achieve. I think that option number 3, to have the 90-10 split, is the optimal and appropriate approach. We want to reduce potential negative impacts on safety, quality, efficiency, but fundamentally, I think that given what the state mandate is for us to put this program out there, 90-10 is the right way to go. And then ultimately in the cycle 3, see where folks have come forward and said that simply wasn't enough, if they come forward at all. Leaving that money on the table is ultimately going to mean fewer rides for folks who need it. And so, Chair, with that, I will move item 4.2, but substituting in option 3 instead of option 1. And that'll conclude my motion.
Thank you. Councilman Moreno.
Thank you. I want to express my support for option 3 in the staff's report, which is actually very similar to option A presented by FACT in their letter dated on May 4th. I don't think it makes sense for SANDAG to divide the Access for All funding among so many different recipients, that it could have the effect of diluting the overall impact of this funding. And another thing that I will state is consistency with this community is very important. My brother has low to no vision, so he was born this way. He has low vision because he had a tumor in his brain, and the tumor was removed, and they had to cut his optical nerve. So he's been going through the process of becoming, mobile and independent, and changing things up on people is very difficult. I mean, if you talk about just, people who could see and walk, it's difficult. Now add a disability, it just makes it very, very difficult for this community. And also FACT's record on providing wheelchair accessibility vehicle services in our region is unmatched. And I think we heard that based on all the callers and the people that have spoken today. So I think it makes sense for SANDAG to give them a key role in trying to grow this service moving forward. So with that, Chair, I'd like to second the motion on the floor, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Mayor Krantz, you have a comment?
Yeah, so I appreciate that FACT has established themselves to the point where we're all seem to be assuming that they would be the grantee in this. But I recognize that may not be the case. I'm assuming we're going to evaluate all the applications and be fair in those evaluations. Full disclosure, I was a member of the board of FACT and think very highly of the organization and recognize that the work that they do is really critical. I think that the goal of expanding the pool of providers is worthwhile, but I noted on slide 8 where you talk about the Cycle 2 funding categories, it says there are dozens of specialized transportation providers for individuals with disability in San Diego County. And I think that it would be useful to have those enumerated and know exactly who they are and be specific. And the term dozens, I don't know whether that means 2 dozen or 6 dozen but I think that it is incumbent on this agency to be encouraging as many of these providers as possible, because it is a challenging service to provide countywide. So I appreciate that that is a goal that you work towards. So I thought option 4 was probably best, especially considering the letter we got from FACT, of course, not assuming that they would necessarily be the grantee, but their pledge to commit 10% of the funding, if you went with option 4, towards developing, mentoring these other organizations, I thought would be a very good use of the funds. But I'm prepared to support the motion, and will be interested to see the mechanics of how SANDAG will award the 10% in that particular case. Thank you.
Members, Edson and then back to Duncan.
Now?
Oh, no, Edson and then back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I do support the motion, and I also am comfortable supporting the comments made by Mayor Krantz. I occupy this seat as the chair of NCTD, but I also serve as SANDAG's appointment to the FACT Board of Directors. So for the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to remove my NCTD hat and put on my FACT hat. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve on the board of FACT, to witness firsthand the dedication of FACT's board and staff to improving the lives of mobility challenged residents throughout San Diego County. As the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, or CTSA, appointed by SANDAG, FACT has a proven track record when it comes to providing mobility options for those with special needs, such as ADA, paratransit, and senior riders. FACT provides accessible travel options to many of the most vulnerable members of our communities. FACT is not alone, as has been pointed out, in providing specialized transportation services to individuals with disabilities in the San Diego region. Specialized transportation funding is precious. As staff's presentation pointed out, there are dozens of providers in San Diego today. In my opinion, a greater number of residents who qualify for the Access for All program will be served if a higher percentage of funding is directed toward the existing providers who have demonstrated the ability to deliver these services. We received a letter from FACT, and it supports staff's desired outcome of cycle 2 funding to promote and develop new AFA service providers, and states that FACT concurs with this objective. And as Mayor Krantz mentioned, FACT is willing to set aside 10% of those funds to do just that. And they do have this proven track record. As we've heard from speakers today, FACT has helped grow the local taxi cab businesses and introduce accessible transportation countywide in a cost-effective and sustainable manner. So I support the motion, but I would also be open to a substitute motion if someone would like to make one for option 4. Thanks.
Councilman Duncan.
Thank you. When I look at this issue, hear from the speakers, research the facts, and research FACT, the organization, I look at where are these dollars going to go and what are they going to do? Are we going to spend them on rides for wheelchair accessible vehicles? Are we going to spend them on a speculative and vague, unknown, no facts on where we're going to spend the money to potentially develop another provider? And I think there's confusion frequently when we talk about it because most of us would like competition and other options for items, right? But FACT isn't the full service provider of the rides. That's not what FACT is. FACT brokers with multiple vendors rides and actually does a lot of the things of this maybe problem we're trying to solve by developing other entities. FACT donates vehicles to other entities to provide rides. FACT does low-cost leases to other entities to provide rides. I'm not for taking money, providing rides for like the gentleman in the wheelchair who spoke, who needs rides, to give it to other entities to potentially someday maybe provide a ride. So I would make a motion for option number 4, a substitute motion, to where we spend the money on actually wheelchair accessible vehicles for rides, for the riders that need the rides. And thank you.
Just a point of clarification, I believe that Member Edson already made the motion to consider a substitute motion to consider option 4.
That's not what she
No,
said.
I didn't
but-
make the motion. I just said I would be open to it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you.
So we have,
Maybe he wants to amend his motion.
well, let me go ahead with the substitute motion to go with option 4 by Councilman Duncan, and I think it was seconded by Councilman Moreno. So we have a substitute motion that's,
Second on the first motion.
what?
She has the second on the first motion.
Well, she said,
She's got motion.
she's the second on both. She's gone on both.
Rolling over in his grave.
Yeah.
Okay, so Councilmember Campillo, go ahead.
Given the direction and consensus of the committee at this point, I'm happy to withdraw my original motion and allow Councilmember Duncan's motion to be the main motion on the floor without any other.
I think
So-
at this point, the first motion belongs to the body, so it can't be withdrawn. So I would suggest voting on the substitute motion first, and then we can go to the main motion.
Well, I'll support Councilmember Duncan's change to mind.
Thank you. So I think we know the sentiment of the commission pretty well, but I have some questions for Ben or Jenny. First, there was an issue of response time for callers. We haven't started the first round of this grant program yet. Was the intent of this program to have fast response time, faster than 24 hours?
Yes, it was. We've actually established from the first cycle of a 12-hour or less response time. And we've gotten some feedback since then from cycle 2 that has concurred with that, provided other opinions. So we're looking at really, since we're starting service, like we've talked about on June 2023, of modeling that 12-hour maximum time. Now, there may be other portions of project proposals that come forward and talk about even smaller response times, for their project proposal. So it may be even whittled down further depending on what the proposal is, but that's where we stand right now with response time.
Correct. So, but cycle one hasn't started yet. It's going to start soon. So
Yeah.
we even have a knowledge of whether or not what the response time of the program, this grant program is funding so far.
That's correct.
Right. So I think that's why some people have mentioned that it may be too early to change the grant program or its criteria, its funding allocations when we don't really know what the performance of the first cycle is yet. And second, does the current grant program, as it stands, preclude or maybe even encourage the recipient of the grant to deal with things like training and getting other startup, smaller organizations to shepherd them into the business of providing this special service?
We do have aspects of that talk about collaborating between entities, coordinating services within the region. So that is in part sort of baked into sort of our current cycle, our current program model.
And FACTS also committed to that in their scope of work for cycle one to grow, meet demand, find out where there's, response times are higher maybe than other areas, and working to find providers or shift their model to help bring that service time down or to add on new providers into their brokerage that could provide quicker service.
Right. And is this grant program encouraging just funding acquisition, or do we just build that into the cost, in which case acquisition of a vehicle isn't very practical, because you can lease a vehicle or you can buy one, and then there's a value of that vehicle that can be passed on even if you go out of business after the first year. So to me, I'm a little worried by automatically saying you need huge startup funding when there's leasing options and also loan options if you purchase one.
So that has been some of the past project proposals have talked about acquisition of wave vehicles. So that's part of why we're bringing up, that as a startup cost. But there surely are other avenues there that are available. Yes.
Right. And I'm a little bit uncomfortable with just saying it's acquisition. When you use grant funds for acquisition purely, you always worry about those funds. What happens to that if that particular recipient goes out of business in 2 years? You have a vehicle that may have a lifespan of 10 years. What happens to that investment? Does that company reap the benefit by selling the vehicle? Does that money come back to the grant program? To me, it gets a little sketchy with limited grant funds. Well, any other comments from members? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to belabor the point. Ms. Blake, one of the first comments you opened up with was about the fact that 1 through 3 have been approved, but we're waiting on number 4. My original motion was designed because of those comments, but maybe I misunderstood them. Just want to make sure we know the full implication of maybe going with 4.
Yeah, 4 is allowed. There's no question.
Okay.
We're still waiting for final confirmation from the CPUC on options 1 through 3.
Understood. Oh, I misunderstood. 4, great.
Yeah, so option 4 has already been approved by CPC.
Yes, it's allowed.
So just for clarification, we're going to go ahead and vote on the substitute motion, which is for option 4. Okay. Which is, I should just state again, it's was moved by Duncan and seconded by Maureen.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
I think with the substitute motion passing, that the original motion dies.
Yes, so the original primary motion is disposed of at this point.
Right. So we can move on to next time on agenda, which is number.
No, we have now the item is at its final stage. Now the item is at its final stage. So we have to vote on item 4. We need to vote.
Oh, and item 4 as a total. So I need a motion to for item 4 as with both. Moved by Campillo.
Second.
And seconded by Duncan. Any discussion?
Wait, this is if I may ask a procedural question, what is the motion and what's happening? I'm not understanding.
So Betsy, can you explain that for us?
Sure. So the substitute motion passed. And because of that, the primary motion is disposed of. It's obsolete. So we don't need to go back to that primary motion. So we can move on to the next agenda item.
We can.
We
So,
can.
So was there some reason why we need to go back? Okay. So I was mistaken by having to have another motion for item number 4. We can go on to item number 5. Item number 5 is an overview of the Transnet 2023 series bond issuance, and we have CFO Andre and Peter from PFM here to give us a presentation. Thank you, Andre.
Thank you, Chair Shu, and good morning, members of the committee. So as I mentioned, today we'll be giving you an overview of our proposed 2023 bond issuance, which includes the termination of our interest rate swaps, as well as a refunding of potentially a couple of our series. As mentioned, today is just an informational item, but the next time that I'll be back here, we'll be here with a full set of documents to review with you. So besides the Sandag team that's been working on this financing, we have also got a group of outside financial experts, including our financial advisor, PFM. In fact, Peter Schellenberg, as you mentioned, is on Zoom with us today. We also have the PFM swap advisor, considering that there's a swap termination. And then we also did a procurement for our bond and disclosure counsel. For this particular series, we selected Stradling as a bond counsel, and our disclosure counsel will be Norton Rose. And currently we have 14 firms in our underwriting pool. All 14 of them responded to the RFP, and Wells Fargo was selected as the senior underwriter, with the co-senior manager being Goldman Sachs. Our co-managers are Bank of America, JP Morgan, and Ramirez. So today I just want to touch on 5 items. First of all, why are we proposing this issuance? Again, it's partly a refunding, partly a swap termination, the potential size and structure of the bonds. I'll touch on the credit considerations. I'll touch on the bond documents that will be coming to you at your next meeting, and then just a calendar of events and when we expect this bond financing to be complete. So in front of you is our current bond portfolio, which is $2.3 billion outstanding. This goes back to 2008 when Transnet 2 was first approved. And generally, we've been to the bond markets every couple of years, either doing an issuance or refunding. And this particular one, financing, is going to be a refunding, as I previously mentioned. The series that we're looking at are the first series that we issued back in 2008 and then potentially part of 2019. Just to give you a little bit of background, you can see that these are synthetically fixed rate notes that we're taking out. So they're actually variable rates with the swaps on top of them that make them synthetically fixed. The reason why we issued these back in 2008 is when Transnet 2 was approved in 2004 by the voters. In 2005, rates were really attractive. And so the only way that you could forward delivery a bond was to do a swap. So we issued the swaps, and then in 2008, we issued the variable rate debt. But I'll talk in a minute. There's the opportunity to get out of the 2008 variable rate and the swaps, which makes our portfolio a lot more risk averse. And since there's a market opportunity to take out a portion of the 2019s, that's what we're going to be looking at too. So these 2 charts basically show the $2.3 billion in debt and what their composition is. You could see that 84% of the debt is fixed rate. And then on the right side, approximately 63% is taxable versus 37% of it being tax exempt. And the portion that we're looking to take out, again, as I mentioned, is a synthetic portion. And the 2019s currently are taxable. We'll be taking those out and making them tax exempt, which basically is obviously at a lower rate. So why are we issuing these bonds? Generally, it's to lower our costs through debt service savings, and at the same time, eliminating the potential risks that we have with our swaps. They have been performing as intended. However, there's also this issue that LIBOR is going away at the end of June. We're transitioning to a new rate called SOFR. And so there's a potential risk that there won't be as much alignment today as we have with our swaps. And so again, it's an opportunity that we have to de-risk our portfolio, have some debt service savings. So all in all, it's a, the market, we have seen interest rates go up tremendously over the last year and a half. And so we're taking advantage of those increase in rates in the market. So the summary is one, to refund the variable rate bonds. Currently, there's $383 million outstanding. And then refund a portion of the 2019. There's $436 million outstanding, but we expect more in about the $120 million range to be refundable based on what market conditions are when we go to price these bonds in late June. So as I mentioned, the par amount could be between 350 to 820 million. The net present value savings, there's a little bit of a range here, 22 to $35 million. Again, markets have been tremendously volatile here the last several months. So depending on what the market conditions are when we go, these bonds are expected to be tax exempt. They'll be sitting in our senior lien, and we also have a tender option on these bonds. So I just want to touch on our credit ratings. There's three levels that our bonds sit on. The senior lien, which a majority of our bonds sit on, except our 2019s. These are AAA rated by two rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Fitch. This is something that we're really proud of because only 5% of municipal issuers throughout the country have two AAA ratings. The second rating is a subordinate lien, which is where our commercial paper sits, as well as the 2019s. And then the last is the junior subordinate lien, which is where our current TIFIA loan sits. And we're actually meeting with the rating agencies next week to show them our proposed financing. I could tell you we're as highly rated as we are AAA, so we don't expect to be higher than that. But if there was an opportunity, we would feel that based on the de-risking of our portfolio, we'd probably be upgraded. But since we're at the highest level, we don't expect that, but we just want an affirmation from them. So included in your package today is the memo from our financial advisor, PFM, that goes into a lot more detail than what I'm describing to you today. It'll talk about general market conditions, the swap termination, the benefits of that, the bond structuring for the 2023, the tender offer that we're going to make on the 2019 bonds. That's the only document that is available today. When we come back to you next time, I'll be presenting with our bond counsel and disclosure counsel. We'll go through all these documents. So next time your package is going to be a lot thicker as we are going to be discussing these items. And again, what we're hoping to do is get a recommendation from the Transportation Committee to the board next time we get together. So our next steps is we will be taking this item to the board next week. This is an item that we call internally as a triple jump. We went to the ITALC, had a discussion with them last week, to TC today, to the board next week. And then when we come back in a week of May 19th to the Transportation Committee with the full document, and I'll be here with our financial advisors, bond counsel, disclosure counsel, go through the documents, and then hopefully get a recommendation from the TC that will go to the board June 5th. And once we get approval from the board, assuming we get approval, we will be traveling to New York City the last week in June to meet with investors and then price the bonds at that time too. So with that, Chair, as I mentioned, PFM is on the line with us on Zoom, and Peter and I are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. We could- Excuse me. Francesca, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one public comment. Blair Beekman, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I'm a bit confused on these sort of financial matters. I hope you can have patience in my public comment at this time. I don't know if this is to close out, find ways to close out the bond or some ways to somehow make it grow and continue. I needed to really comment that there are, I think, some really important stopgap measures that we can offer. Sandag and San Diego Transit can offer the future to create better service as we wait for, you know, the large transit center agency to develop and the subway system to develop. I think there's really important good stopgap measures you can offer at this time. One of them is what the concepts of ride sharing. And another option that's really important, I feel, is how to create a continuum of bus service, a more frequency of service, you know, every half hour actually presents ways that creates better ridership and efficiency. It's a really good practice that currently it has a really good potential, and that currently SD MTS bus riders call in sick all the time on their bus routes, leaving bus riders stranded constantly. At the airport, several times after 10 p.m., there is no bus service at all. People are left stranded there continuously. It is a serious issue and problem. You have to find funding ways and to develop union contract policies with bus drivers to fund these things, to get these things going. And you're not doing that. There has to be money available now to do that. I hope these bond issues is a part of that good process that I'm going to have to bring to public comment more often. Thank you.
I'm sorry, we do have one additional public comment, the original draw. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, Blair, it is a bit confusing. I mean, so I'm wondering, you guys, you know, you're saying you want to take advantage of increased market rates, but you want to lower costs and debt service savings. I guess, so are you just going to continue to keep these in the market? I don't really know. But I wanted to say about the agenda item just before, because it's really important. Those vehicles do not cost $100,000. You can get them for cheaper. There's a place called Brawnability that actually will convert vehicles or makes their own to sell for the wheelchair capable vehicles. So the fact that you're just saying that it's like $100,000, you could get probably two for that price, especially if you go and you're like telling them that you want more than one. I'm just saying, like, the way that you guys claim that things cost so much when in reality they don't. I've owned one before. But also, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. That concludes the public commenters.
Thank you. So this item, Andre, is really a discussion information item. It will come back and then actually go for the full board later. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Chair, may I please ask a couple of questions? Thank you. Thank you, Andre, for the presentation. The perceived risk from the transition of LIBOR to SOFR at the end of June, what is the perceived risk? More volatility, that floating index will increase, that the rates will increase? What is the perceived risk with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's an unknown market index that has been around now. It's been kind of created because LIBOR is going away. And so LIBOR has been matched pretty well with our interest rates, with our swaps to our variable rate bonds. And so it's potentially something that we decided that there could be some dislocation. And so what's generally happened is since interest rates have really increased, the value of our swap termination has gone down tremendously. If you look at PFM's memo, it showed it was about $125 million in the negative about 2 years ago. Today it's in the range of $15 million negative. And so that coupled with the SOFR changing, it's an opportune time for us to get out. Now, I would say that the swaps have been performing as intended, but since the opportunity is there, it's like, why don't we take it? And Peter, since you're on the line, if you want to make any other comments on SOFR, please do.
Yeah. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Again, Peter Schellenberger from PFM. The transition from LIBOR to SOFR, which will occur July 1st, it's expected to be a fairly smooth transition. It's been contemplated for years now. The date was supposed to occur probably about a year ago. It's been pushed out. So folks have had plenty of time to anticipate this and prepare for it, and the financial markets have as well. So I think that as a standalone event doesn't carry much immediate risk. The transition, though, from one index to another, although it should be smooth on day one and through the initial weeks, there's room for that index just to price differently than LIBOR. And so there is some uncertainty in the long term. So the immediate transition, I don't think we view as a high risk event. There's some uncertainty that goes with a change, any sort of change. And to Andre's point, yeah, the market dynamics is really driving this, not so much to avoid a specific risk. The fact that if we enter into the markets and currently can save about $20 million on the present value basis compared to keeping the synthetic fixed rates in place, compared to keeping the swaps and the variable rate bonds in place, if we fix out and convert to tax exempt debt, we'll save about $20 million. That's really the motivating force to save money. The second point is to take an already well-managed debt portfolio that results in a AAA rating. So it's got external verification that you do a great job managing this portfolio, to reduce any sort of counterparty risk to your bank counterparties, to reduce any sort of risk to commercial banks who provide liquidity for the bonds, and then to take any sort of concern with long-term transition from LIBOR to SOFR off the table. It just simplifies the portfolio and your narrative. That's sort of your ancillary benefits on top of the 20 million in savings.
On the to stay in the money on the cost savings, the higher the variable rate goes on the floating index on the LIBOR or SOFR, the higher that rate goes, the lower the termination cost. Do I understand that correctly? The termination value goes down.
If that's posed to me, correct, is long-term taxable. Frankly, it's to make it a little more complex. It's the longer term LIBOR swap rate. So it's not the short term rate. It's really about a 10-year mark on the LIBOR swap curve, just to throw out some fairly technical terms. The 10-year rate on the LIBOR swap curve is what determines the mark to market on the swap. And so as that is elevated over the course of the last 18 months, as the Fed has increased rates and the entire interest rate curve has increased, it's more the longer term rates have helped decrease the mark to market on the swaps. So generally, you're right. The increase in rates has reduced the mark to market on the swap portfolio.
So with the transition to SOFR, you don't anticipate that that floating rate will go down. The fixed rate on the tax exempt bonds likely to continue to go up potentially based on the market conditions now. But it looks like we'll stay in the money with the cost savings, assuming something really, really strange doesn't happen where those floating rates come down.
That's correct.
Okay. What discount rate are you assuming, or did you use on the cost savings that are cited at the beginning of the staff report?
That's a detailed question I have not yet committed to memory. So let me.
% rate, Peter, the discount rate we used?
Sure. Yeah. If you look.
2.5 to 3%.
2.5 to 3% on the discount rate. Seems pretty low in this environment, no?
You know what we're using, and the market standard is again, it's a technically driven rate. It's the arbitrage yield. on the bonds.
Okay.
And that arbitrage yield is about 3.5%. Well, let me just again, and committee member, that may be a question we get back to you and specify with an exact number, but it'll be the arbitrage yield. The market specifies that we should use the arbitrage yield to discount any cash flows to present them in present value terms. And we can pull the specific ARB yield.
And looking to close by the end of June, prior to the transition to SOFR?
So we are looking to price the bonds in the last week of June, but ultimately it takes maybe a couple of weeks to close the bond deal. But the goal is that we will basically terminate our swaps by June 30th. Ultimately, the deal will probably close within the first 2 weeks of July.
And what are the estimated costs, our internal transaction costs with respect to counsel, financial advisors, underwriters? We have a ballpark figure on those costs?
I do have a ballpark figure. I'd like to get back to you on that only because we're actually completing our board report today, and that's something that we actually have to put in as a resolution to the board. But in general, I would say it's about in the $2.5 million range between what we have to pay for bond counsel, disclosure counsel, S&P ratings, our financial advisors, and then what we have to pay to our underwriters, which in this case is $1.50 a bond. But that'll be something that'll be in the resolution, the documents next week.
Thank you very much, Andre. Thank you, sir. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Raphael. This is just a discussion item, so we can move on unless there's any other. Mayor Krantz.
I recognize the savings, and that's attractive in spite of what seemed significant costs that the agency will still realize this huge savings. And there was a conversation about risk related to this transition from LIBOR. Overall, it seems like the net on what we're doing in this transaction is going to lower risk. And I'm asking him, is that assumption that I'm making correct? You don't speak to risk directly in the staff report.
It lowers risk overall because we are getting rid of our swaps.
Right.
Okay. And it also lowers our debt service that we have to pay on an annual basis. And overall, it gives us more flexibility in the future. As much as we say that this is a synthetically fixed rate, when the rating agencies rate us, they rate the portfolio as though those synthetically fixed rate bonds are variable rate. And so down the road, if we don't have any exposure to any variable rate, maybe 5 years from now, there's the opportunity for us to, as transit gets shorter, to issue variable rate debt. So it also gives us more flexibility in the future.
And one last question, are the maturity dates moving? Will they change as this transaction takes place, or are we going to end with the same maturity date on these bonds?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So generally, the variable rate bonds go through 2038, and that's where the new series of bonds will go. The refunding bonds go through 2048 or the end of the program, and they will also go to 2048. So we are not changing the duration of the
Thank
bonds.
you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you, Andre, very much. Thank you, Peter. And, the Port District is very welcome to get this extra information for your needs as well from Sandag. In any case, let's go on to number 6. So Brian and Arun, we have a presentation about FACT.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and PC. We're going to try to clear up some of the questions we got months ago as the last specialized transportation grant programs cycle, I believe 11 or 12 went through. FACT had not received some funding in that. They also serve as our CTSA, which I'll talk about a little bit. So they wear multiple hats and are funded. And then, we just heard a lot about the AFA and how they're funded through that. So I'll do a little bit of information at the beginning and then hand it over to Arun to talk a little bit more about what FACT does and with CTSA and then what they're kind of considering as we move through future cycles. CTSA is a Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and that's a state legislated activity. Around 2006, we put out a procurement asking for anyone in the region who would like to serve as a CTSA for Sandag, knowing that it had certain limitations and funding at that time. Back in 2006, FACT was the only person or entity that applied, and they won. Over the years, that dollar amount had changes from the TDA, the Transportation Development Act. Currently, they're getting about $190,000 in fees to do their CTSA specific activities. And this is where it gets a little confusing on the different hats that FACT does. But CTSAs have multiple things they're supposed to do, but the big one is really that promoting the consolidation of social service transportation services and ensuring cost effectiveness in the delivery of those services. So doesn't specifically say provide rides, but I think that's been a more and more kind of an ask in the region of ensuring that people are getting rides. And so we're trying to figure out how we move that into the CTSA activities as well. Funding a CTSA through those limited TDA dollars comes up again and again when we do the triennial TDA performance audits. Back in FY15 and then again in FY18, our auditors just had a soft recommendation that we really work with our CTSA to find more guaranteed funds. And so as a response from that in July 2020, the TC and then the board approved an allocation of 25% both from our senior mini grant and our 5310 grant programs to give directly to FACT or to our CTSA, which is FACT, to do their CTSA activities. In that cycle, it was about $820,000 for our senior mini grants, it's SMG here, and about $1 million from our 5310, the FTA dollars that we get. Those services began in April 2022. I guess to clarify, and here's where it does get a little confusing, and hopefully this helps resolve some of that. So CTSA activities are those activities that they do as part of their obligations with us and the TDA. They also apply themselves competitively for other grants to provide more rides directly under their Ride Fact services, and Arun will talk a little bit more about that. It was in cycle 12 that FACT did not get a little bit of those funding. So cycle 12, a year ago, they applied or got the carve off of $790,000 for the Section 5310 only. At that time, legal counsel here had a deep dive into the Transnet ordinance and noticed that the senior mini grant really probably should, before we do carve-offs, we should probably have that ordinance amended, the language ordinance amended to specifically say that. For 5310, the FTA is perfectly fine with us doing that carve-off and then competing out the rest. But it would require an ordinance amendment for the senior mini grant. So in cycle 12, we just gave the $5310 only on that one. And as part of that, FACT got the $790,000, and then they did win one or two other grants on that cycle, but did not win a couple others due to the competitive nature of those. And that's where we had that big discussion a few months ago. So looking forward for cycle 13 and beyond, ideally we could give a direct allocation for both 5310 and senior mini grant. But it would require that Transnet ordinance amendments, and ordinance amendments may be coming to you this summer or this fall, but those aren't a given. And so we really are trying to look for other ways we can directly allocate funding towards CTSA activities, as well as including Ride Fact activities. So with that, I'll pass it over to Arun to talk more about what they're doing with their Ride Fact services.
Thank you, Brian. And good morning, and thank you again, committee members, for this opportunity. The reason I'm here talking about funding for FACT is because during cycle 2, although we were close, we were not funded. The scoring was done appropriately by Sandag staff. It was not a matter of discrimination of any kind. The process was followed. So that's why it's important for me to state why we're back here asking for funds. There was debate during TC and the following board meeting about why it was important to review the criteria, which was discussed by Jenny earlier, due to some anomalies and unintended consequences, but also why it's critical, irrespective of the process or outside of the process, which is what I'm recommending today, to fund the services provided by the CTSA. So I hope to be able to distinguish between funding an entity in the South Bay or in the East County that's serving a population that's deserving and doing a great job, and serving and funding FACT, which serves the entire county with accessible services affordably. So it's a critical lifeline as opposed to other great services that operate in our area. And as the CTSA FACT is in the unique and somewhat difficult position of supporting everybody else who's providing accessible services, as well as also competing for funds. And that's another reason why we shouldn't have this dynamic where the CTSA has to and should support other providers, and yet competing with them creates distrust and creates an environment where we can't be as effective as we could be and we should be. The picture that you're looking at is it's not a typical FACT vehicle. We own a few vehicles, not very many. Right now, it's less than 10. We use grant funds to obtain these vehicles. And then as the vendors you heard from earlier explained, we share them with the vendors. We don't operate any vehicles in-house to keep the cost low. We share these vehicles with vendors like Abdi and like for us who are sitting in the back. They operate these vehicles and provide services for us in the most cost-effective manner that we figured out through FACTS brokerage. And that's considered a model, not just for San Diego, but across the USA. I want to show you a video as introduction to not what FACT does. I think we all know that. The video does a fantastic job, in my opinion, in showing what FACT does for the user, for the riders that we help. So it's a very brief video. So I hope you'll just indulge me for a couple of minutes, and then I'll move on quickly to the rest of the presentation. So help me out. Thank you. So press play again. Yeah.
FACT has been extremely important in my life. I have had a very active life, and even into my older age, I developed serious glaucoma in my eyes. It necessitated a particular surgery in my right eye, and the surgery unfortunately did not go like planned. I virtually lost my vision in my right eye, and I really basically can't see to do the things I want to do. Number one thing I can't do is drive. Until you are put in a place where you can't drive, you have no idea how that changes your life. And that's where FACT has come in and has really played a very important part in my life.
I wouldn't be able to get out of the house so much if it was not for this service.
I was introduced to FACT about 1.5 years ago. At that time, I had just been dropped VA transportation because I was not a 20-year retiree.
There's a need for more services for our citizens who otherwise would be confined to their homes and not have access to health care, recreation, and friends. FACT fills that need by providing to all citizens in San Diego County the ability to go places, do things, and maintain a high quality of life.
A friend of mine at the VA hospital in La Jolla told me about FACT.
I've had to frequently go see my eye doctor down in the UTC area, and FACT was there taking me back and forth and back and forth.
Every week I go through the process of getting my appointments so they can pick me up It's almost required maybe 7 days in advance. If you have like an urgent visit to the doctor or you want to go somewhere, you can either call maybe even 3 days before and they'll schedule you.
They pick you up at a perfect time. As many times as I've used them, they were always on time. I've never had a problem with it. They really go out of their way to be on time.
To compliment, first of all, the people that are in the inside office, they always help me. If I need to change a time, they're willing to work with me.
If you need help, they'll help you. This van takes me from that house directly to wherever I've got to go. They take care of me.
At this stage of my life, I would be at an enormous loss if suddenly FACT didn't exist. It's been very significant in at least trying to help restore some of the ability I had to maneuver prior to losing my vision. FACT.
Thank you. And to follow up on that, I just want to underline some basic characteristics of FACT service. We're countywide. We provide wheelchair accessible services. I think we're the only one in the public realm that does that for affordable rates. We are an affordable service. We serve seniors and people with disabilities. And we extend services to others on temporary basis, one time, that don't have people who don't have other options. We provide rides irrespective of trip purpose. You may have heard today and earlier during public comment that we only serve medical rides. That is incorrect. We provide rides for any purpose at all on a first come, first served basis. And we fill gaps in other transportation services, meeting first mile, last mile needs. And where services don't exist at all, we try to go and fill in the gaps. Obviously, for the grant that we receive annually, $400,000, that's a really tall order. For year 24 and the cycle 12, we don't even have that funding. You've heard about AFA, and sometimes it serves as a distraction. AFA is a new grant. It's a one-year commitment. So that doesn't really do anything to sustain FACT in the long term. And as you heard during discussion today, the second year AFA is all still up in the air. The situation in San Diego with accessible services, I think is really misunderstood or not understood very often. And I took the liberty of bringing this couple of slides to you just to make a point that we are in a situation where demographics are changing. The seniors in the population as a proportion are growing, but the funding is not, it's definitely not growing, and the need is getting much worse. This report by Transportation for America was done a while back, so it's a little bit dated, but if anything, the current situation shows that the need is much more dire than even they predicted when this was done in 2000. It's a little complicated, but a very interesting graphic depiction. And what this means is the darker the color orange, that means the worst access seniors have to transit. And the darker the green, that means the best access that seniors have to transit. That's the best way I could explain this without going into too much detail. The interesting thing about this study was it went on for a few years, and I want to show you the contrast when we move 5 years forward. The dark areas where seniors have bad access to transit have literally encroached upon most of the county now. For the Transportation Committee's purpose, I wanted to underline this graph to me is really eye-opening and startling. All of the funding that goes to transit in this region goes to less than 5% of land area in this county. But the need, as you can see, is everywhere, and there is no money for it, other than Specialized Transportation Grant Program, which is $7 million in good years for a 2-year period. So I just wanted to share that quick sort of eye-opening little fact about senior transportation and specialized transportation need and how funding is apportioned in our region. Well, so what we need and what we could do and what we're requesting the committee and Sandag's board to consider is that for the year 2023 and 4, we were not approved for funding at all. The Right Fact funding was denied, so 100% of it, $400,000 that we would normally receive, we did not get that. The problem will be offset by the award and implementation of the AFA Cycle 1 program, which is funded to meet our Right Fact needs for the year 2023-24, because Sandag staff have worked with us in making sure that the riders we serve qualify under the AFA 1 grant. For the following year, though, we are back to a situation where we have no funding for Right Fact at all. If we are successful with AFA Cycle 2, we may overcome that problem, but that very much is a dynamic process and hard to predict. And that underlines my request here is that the critical service that we provide that's needed by, you saw the need in that graph, that should not be a matter of speculation and uncertainty and something that we have to guess whether that will be available from year to year. We are requesting Sandag, and as Brian mentioned, Sandag has accepted that argument and is looking at the process right now through the Mobility Working Group to address that by off-the-top funding for FACT. We hope that with your support and the board's support that we will get to that point. But I hope that I was able to call your attention to why this call for funding for FACT is urgent and it needs your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. Brian, let's go to public comments first.
Thank you, Chair. We have several public comments on this item. I'll start with Dr. Timothy Bylish and then go to Abdi.
I'm sorry. I have one slide to share if you could share my screen. My name is Timothy Bylish. I talked before. Thank you. There's a number of things here, 2 minutes. It may be hard, so please, I ask you to pay a little attention. And this relates to item agenda 4. I thank the presentation from FACT and Brian Lamb. The page 9 of the handout, if I could just share it, or you go back, either one. I think is telling. And one of the issues I would try to highlight, it's not just where you come from, it's also where you go. And so if there were a map on equivalent to item 9, do I have a share for that? Maybe
Tim,
not.
you have the ability to share, but you'd have to be logged into the Zoom meeting to
I am.
share it that way. So I can't
I am.
take care of it for you.
I am. So not to deviate, but if there were a map for the connections, because it's not just where you're coming from, it's not just where you're going, it's also how you get there, but it's also how you return. And so if that map were kind of available with some type of intensity for the ride itself, the number of rides and who you serve, I think that might be helpful. Also, there's a relocation going on for the houseless and the seniors. And so this, as you mentioned, is a dynamic process in terms of which parts of the areas are being served and who should pay for it. I would ask that maybe some of the cities should pony up a little bit to this item as well and not just rely on grant funding. A little confusion on my part and the discussion in item 4 was, is this redistributing the pie or are we getting bigger pie? Because I think this needs more pie area. As well, just to mention, Valley Center is attempting to build an intergenerational center, and I hear items from people talk out there of the difficulties for access in the rural communities. You see the number of underserved of the seniors out there, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I'm sorry about the slide. If you'd like to send it to me via email, I'm happy to send it to the committee members for you.
It just noted slide 9 on FACT's presentation.
Okay, great. Okay, great. It's a part of the meeting record already then. So next we'll go to Abdi. And Abdi will be followed by George Maverick.
Thanks again for allowing me to speak. My name is Abdi Karim Hussain. I'm with the Lead Medical Transport. And as I've said earlier, we've been partnering with FACT. I know a lot of you talk about transportation but we actually see the actual individuals that, benefit from these services. And one of the most important thing is that they continue to receive the service. A lot of times funding run out, then they have to figure out another way to get it. Recently, FACT notified those riders that they received the funding and they were very excited to contact us before we even knew about it to let us know we're going to be getting a transportation soon. And because we are even though the funding starts from here, we're the contact to those riders. And a lot of times we see how important and grateful they are to receive these transportation services. And you have to understand who are these riders that go through FACT services. A lot of them are people that worked hard. Currently, they're not poor enough to be on, Medicaid or Medi-Cal. So HMOs are not providing transportation to them. So they turn to FACT to provide for that. They're not well enough to pay out of their pocket. So they're caught up in the middle. And that's why they turn to FACT. And I would, they would appreciate if the funding can continue and not keep cutting off. But currently, right now, I think the way it is that they would have to call first thing in the morning for them to be, it's first come, first served type of situation because of the funding. So I would say, on behalf of the riders, no disruption of service will be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be George Maverick, and George will be followed by Dan Tota.
Yes, thank you. First thing I want to say is I appreciate the fact that in the past I was served by FACT, and I'm really appreciative to Sandag for allowing that to happen. Where I'm located, 6 miles above a mountain, from the nearest bus stop, it's very important that I have some sort of access. And FACT has provided that. I think FACT is the only one that I know that provides that. And so I would appreciate the funding that will allow that to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Dan Tota. And after Dan, we'll move on to the public commenters that are on Zoom and start with Blair Beekman.
Hello again, Transportation Commission. I use FACT services. Like on a Sunday, there's no bus route in San Diego that comes by my house. So I have to rely on FACT on Sunday to get around. And they cover the whole county. They cover from Fallbrook to San Ysidro, from Alpine to the beaches. And they're the only company, because I've called around, they're the only company that covers the whole county. They're there for people on dialysis, which I've been on many times. And it's a service that is very, very important to me, as well as a lot of other people in San Diego County. And I just look forward to using FACT in the future and providing Sandag providing funding for Sandag. It's hard for people to get around, and to have a service like this that has no borders, like the fixed bus route system, the 1/3 of the 3/4 of a mile, and they won't pick you up. So on Sunday, I'm in that 3/4 of a mile zone where I can't be picked up. So I can use FACT, and then I appreciate their services, and I hope there'll be some extra funding for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Blair Beekman, who will be followed by the original draw. Blair, you can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks a lot for this item. It explains things very well. It was a very good presentation. Thank you. It's nice to know that this sort of service can provide many variations of not just disabled or elderly. It can serve many people of a community. Thank you. My previous public comment on item 4 about how to explore different funding measures and the importance of ride-sharing programs in our future. It's really important to me that it's not competitive in how to do that, and that this program seems to have started a really good example and a really good public comment today. Yeah, so I'm very happy with these good beginnings. How the concepts of rideshare can be better explored and understood. Good luck in those efforts. This is a really good program, it seems. It's off to a really good start. It's been talked about before. I don't want at all this program to be hurt and how to expand its already good services to people. It's learning that process. Good luck to ourselves, how we can do that. And thank you for this item.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the original draw, and I apologize. I inadvertently missed one of the public speakers in the room. So after the original draw, I'll go back to Faraz and provide his speaking time.
I guess there's a little bit of confusion here I'm finding, because one of the board members had mentioned that FACT does get outside funding. And so I'm just wondering if they're relying solely on Sandag to provide funding, or if they continue to seek it elsewhere. But this is a really important service to offer people. And I just don't understand why only 400,000 would even go to them. It should be more, because that's only going to maintain the baseline service. And I thought the idea is to expand service and to make it more convenient for people to just get all the time. I mean, if it's first come, first serve, I guess I'm wondering, does that mean for anybody, or just the people that you serve, it's first come, first serve? I mean, or are you just taking anybody if they wanted to not ride Uber and give you a call? I mean, is that who you're talking about too? Because then that would take away from the people that actually need it. But providing more money, I think, would allow them to not take so long for people to request a ride and get the ride. It should be something like an Uber where people can just call and say, hey, I need to go wherever. So I don't know if that means getting more vehicles or what, but $400,000 seems a little bit minimal when you guys have, millions of dollars that you throw around. In fact, you got, billions of dollars that you throw around. I just think you should be thinking about doing something to not just maintain a baseline service, but to expand it and make it better. So I don't know. I just feel like it should be a little bit more money, and you guys have the money to do that, which is the people's money. And these are people that, give you the money to spend on them. So you should be spending it to improve things, not just maintain a baseline service.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Faraz. And you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. For us again from SD Med. I just wanted to mention something. I've done rides myself to senior people, disabled people who basically the only time they get out is when they get a ride through FACT. And some of those people, they go shopping or they go to church. I remember I took one lady to the cemetery, and that's pretty much the only time they go out. Recently, it's been almost a year now, where FACT, their funds got cut. And I've been getting a lot of calls from riders who wants to ride, but FACT doesn't cover them, and some of them could afford to pay out of pocket cash, and some of them just end up not getting a ride. So I really support FACT and getting the funds. It's just it's really touchy to see those disabled people, elderly people getting happy just to see the streets, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you for committee members' comments or questions. I just want to to point out, we have a hard stop time at 12 and we have 3 more items on the agenda to go forward. So I want to keep that in mind with the comments. I'll start with Vice Chair Campillo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Lane, Mr. Prem, for your good work in the presentation. I'm a proud supporter of FACT and the work that you and your team, Mr. Prem, are doing across the entire county. Multiple times we've seen you and know what you're providing, especially to the constituents that I represent in Linda Vista with the pilot program there. I think the points that you make and the requests that you're making are very reasonable and not just reasonable, but needed. You are CTSA, and so figuring out that sustainable and reliable funding source for FACT is a top priority of mine. It's not fair to our CTSA to have to fight for funding every year, providing these services that we've designated for our region. A year after year battle is not does not create the sense of certainty, not just as an organization, but to the people of the public that you serve, who are wondering that if we don't do our job and get that funding through multiple means, are they going to have a ride every single year and into the future? I appreciate the willingness of Sandag staff to take the concerns of FACT to heart, and many of this committee's members seriously as well, so that we can figure out how to move that forward. And I look forward to working with you further and our Sandag staff to address the long-term funding needs. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I will just say, my previous comments stand for this as well. And since we have a small amount of time, I'll leave it at that. And thank you, Vice Chair Campillo, for your comments.
Sure. If there aren't any other comments, Mayor Krantz, I'm sorry.
So we heard the presentation. How are we going to make recommendations to the board for more funding for FACT?
First of all, must have been a few months ago, the board for Sandag did put on the legislative agenda advocating for additional funding for CTAs. So we did that as a board. So that is a priority for Sandag's legislative advocacy work. And with that, and we could continue to do that and move forward. With regards to the funding process or the grant criteria, I think staff is getting a pretty good sentiment of where we're going with that and how we're going to proceed.
There seems to be an ask for $400,000 here. So am I mistaken in that?
There's no action on that
I get there's no action. I guess what I'm wondering is, will there be an agenda item that we can discuss how that might happen? It was my understanding
from a motion towards for staff direction to look into that further.
It was my understanding when FACT was not granted money on the last program that there was going to be an exploration by staff about how we can. And is that coming back? Whatever you found from that exploration of ways to fund FACT? And this was just kind of an interim presentation to kind of highlight why it is that we're looking for that.
I mean, maybe I could jump in. So cycle 13 won't come out for another year. We'll be preparing the criteria and the carve-offs for that over the next 6 months. Jenny's group will be doing that. But still, to answer your question, no, that still won't solve the $400,000 gap in the next year. If AFA cycle 2 is successful for FACT, that could cover that. But in the interim, like a couple people said, the pie is not big enough or bigger, and there's nothing I'm sure we can do at this moment to help with that. I mean, we could hope that this AFA cycle 2 is successful, but otherwise, I'm not sure what we
it
could
seems
do
like what we've done is reiterate the reason why figuring out how to find funding for FACT is what we're getting presented today. And I'm a little frustrated by the fact that there doesn't seem to be a path to get the question before the board. And so I'm looking to have a better understanding of what that might be. And I don't know whether you mentioned a motion, or can I ask for an action item on a TC agenda so that I know, we're a multi-billion-dollar agency. And I'm not saying $400,000 isn't a significant amount of money, but for a service as vital as this, we need to find it.
I see other hands up, so Councilmember Moreno.
In regards to the time that we have right now, I obviously want to be respectful of the committee, but I do agree with the mayor, and maybe something that we can do is a potential future action item where we could discuss this. And I think that's up to the chair's discretion, whether, I think you're hearing the body is interested in moving in this direction. So that's what I would propose to keep the conversation going.
Councilmember Duncan.
Thank you. So to reiterate how we got here and where we are specifically, we had a transportation committee meeting where this issue came up where they were not funded. The transportation committee specifically voted to send it to the board of directors and recommend that the board approve the staff looking at alternate ways to fund it. So then when the board meeting came, that was not on the agenda of the board. That part was missing. So we brought it up. The board did vote to send it back to transportation, asking staff to come up with alternates to fund this deficit in FACT's budget. And what I may still be unclear on is, and I appreciate Mr. Prim, I think he's gracious in how he discusses the matter. There's the first year and the second year, correct? So when I heard Mr. Lane's comments just now, are we saying that we're stopping looking at funding the second year, which we don't have the funding for? Or is that potentially still being reviewed? Because I understand that the first year, maybe we're all saying, hey, we realize it may not be possible and there's other funding that will cover it from the other grant. But as to the second year, as Mayor Krantz said and others, that's a real problem that we need to ensure continues to work towards being solved. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want to make sure that we have what's next. In other words, as Mayor Krantz said, what is the next step to solve this issue as the board has already directed us to do?
So to move things along, could we have a motion to direct staff to come back with options on actually a better picture on funding these programs in the first place with a better, maybe a pie chart and then options of SANDAC going forward?
I'd second that motion.
I guess I made the motion then. Thank you. And so we can go forward. And for clarification, Antoinette, do you want to say anything more? I didn't give you a chance to say anything.
No, I was just going to suggest the same thing, that staff come back with some different funding options for the Transportation Committee to consider.
Great. So any other discussion? If not, we could have a vote on that motion.
That motion passes unanimously with
Thank
those
you.
members
I
present.
have one quick question for Arun. What's your what's the total budget for FACT and how many rides do you provide a year? Just give me a huge, whatever number you want. Well, your estimate will be fine.
In the current fiscal year that we're in, our budget was approximately $2.5 million, which includes CTS activities as well as Right Fact services and other services like CAM management that we provide. The number of rides is approximately 40,000 in 1 year. And the funding that we have for Right Fact, as you know, is only 400,000 out of that budget. The rest of the transportation we do is based on fee for services, because as a nonprofit, we feel we have to find any and every means to fund these services. And we have contracts with City of Escondido, City of San Marcos, Scripps Medical, Tri-City Medical, where we meet their client needs and charge them for the services we provide.
Great. Thank you so much both for giving a report. We're going to move on to item number 7, and with 2 parts, 7A and 7B. And we have item 7 is information about the Blue Line, Purple Line studies, and Zach and Cecile here to give us our presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
My name is Zach Hernandez. I'm a planner here at Sandag. I'm joined by my colleague and fellow planner, Cecily Taylor, who's with me today. And as the title of this agenda item kind of suggests, we're here to talk about steps that Sandag is taking to advance implementation of some of the key projects in our regional plan. And as you all know, hopefully you have heard by now, the 5 big moves within the regional plan kind of set us up to take and bring together the best of transportation planning, innovative technologies, and strategic investments in the years to come to better integrate our urban fabric and our transportation network, with the goal ultimately of making how we get around our region more efficient, more equitable, and more sustainable. And so while the regional plan is future and forward-looking, it also highlights ways that we can get more out of the existing system that we have today. So Cecily and I will share a bit about some upcoming studies that are going to help us identify ways that we can improve service along the existing and the busy Blue Line corridor, while we advance plans for a future Purple Line corridor as well. So today, the Blue Line is really kind of the backbone of the regional transit system. It's the most heavily used trolley line, accounting for more than half of all the trolley ridership system-wide, connects tens of thousands of people every single day between the US-Mexico border, South Bay communities, downtown San Diego, and as of November 2021, up to UCSD and University City area. For many people, the Blue Line is kind of the only north-south travel option, providing a real alternative to the congested I-5 freeway. And given the demand and the importance of the line, the region has made a number of investments over the years to the infrastructure and service levels. But even with 7.5-minute frequencies in the peak periods today, a lot of these segments are operating at capacity, sometimes standing room only. And travel times overall are significantly longer via transit than they are via auto. The Purple Line is envisioned future as a really robust passenger rail connection, serving many key destinations, employment and education centers that maybe today the Blue Line or other rail connections don't serve. So Cecily will talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but these 2 lines, in conjunction obviously with the rest of the investments in the regional plan, are really how we envision the system becoming more competitive, creating more mode shift, and ultimately getting us to a more sustainable future with more options and more equitable outcomes. So we know the Blue Line is a heavily used connection right now, connects a large stretch of the region. But what sometimes gets lost in the conversation is that it's doing so despite a lot of challenges that are limiting factors in how efficient the line could be. In order to understand how to improve the line that we have today, we have to understand what those challenges are, what those factors are. And so the Blue Line Express study, the planning work that we'll get started on this summer, is really trying to dissect what's happening in this corridor, especially in the most constrained segments, and develop some ideas, some options for how to make travel in those segments more efficient. And so, yes, the opening of the Mid-Coast line was a big stride, a big accomplishment towards our regional mobility goals, extended access to the tune of 11 miles, but still the downtown and the South Bay segments, the ones that were existing before then, are really constrained. So there's where our study is going to be focused on for now. And to highlight a few things that we kind of already know about the constraints in these 2 segments through downtown, some of the key things are that the local downtown streets, Park Boulevard and C Street, where the line is currently operating, are really active, really congested. And so you have transit at grade with regular traffic, with pedestrian traffic. You have a lot of traffic lights that you have to synchronize. It's very busy and very constrained. Through the South Bay segment, it's kind of similar. You're at grade through most of this section, and the same thing. You have to synchronize traffic lights, which is not always the easiest thing to do. You have traffic, you have pedestrians that are using the same space as the trolley infrastructure, but kind of from an operational and agreement perspective too. Through the South Bay, you're sharing a lot of this rail infrastructure with freight, with cargo operations as well. So in terms of the span of service that's possible on the Blue Line, we're kind of constrained from that perspective as well. And so while it's important to know the challenges, obviously, that's not the study's only goal or the only focus. Taking a fresh look at the Blue Line gives us a chance to potentially integrate with and leverage a lot of the awesome things that are happening along the corridor. I just want to highlight a couple here today. But 2 months ago, this committee heard an update on the San Ysidro Mobility Hub effort and the work that's ongoing right now to look at how to create more space and more operational capacity for the Blue Line in the near term. And pretty soon we're going to get started on what does a long-term aspirational visioning of that space and that critical station look like too. Another thing that we're excited about is building on a lot of the momentum right now around transit-oriented development. That's kind of being pursued as we speak. I mean, we saw MTS be really active over the last couple of years, seeking out development agreements at stations like Byer, at Palm, at East Street, et cetera. And so a separate but related effort that we're excited to get started on also this summer is the Blue Line TOD study, Transit Oriented Development Study. And this is an FTA grant funded effort to explore TOD, infill, and mobility improvements at and around both the San Ysidro and the Palomar station. So we're excited about getting that study underway, and we can bring back a more formal presentation as we get going. In addition to kind of looking at how can we speed up travel times, we're going to be exploring ways to make new connections happen, especially integrating future hubs, not least of which is Central Mobility Hub and the future airport connection. So we're going to be working closely with that team to coordinate on where, but also how that connection could happen in the downtown space. And it's not just these things that we're kind of showing on screen. I mean, if you think about the Chula Vista Bayfront redevelopment, all these massive capital improvements are going to be happening along the corridor. We have a lot of opportunities. The list of challenges is long, but also the list of opportunities is also long. And really the purpose of the study is to determine what's possible and, importantly, what is it going to take to make those opportunities feasible and tangible. And this is kind of a necessary first step to guide future investment in the Blue Line and ultimately making our mobility, equity, and climate goals more tangible, more attainable for this really important service and this important corridor. That's kind of it in terms of the context of the study. In terms of where we are right now, we're actually looking to get started with this work this summer. As I mentioned, we released an RFP, request for proposals, just on May 4th, in fact. So we're looking forward to getting a consultant on board to help us with this work. By fall, winter, in that time period, we're going to be establishing some basically baseline expectations for what does express level service in this corridor look like? How does it operate? What are the goals? We work backwards from there to develop some initial alternatives that we think can meet those parameters and those operational goals. By the start of next year, we're going to be exploring what other modal alternatives, namely, express bus, maybe it's rapid bus service that could be implemented potentially sooner, much sooner, to achieve those same operational goals, serve some of that demand while we continue to advance plans for future rail improvements. By the middle of next year, we're going to be assessing those alternatives in terms of their pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses. And generally, we expect to conclude the study late next year, by winter next year. And as you see on screen, outreach is going to be happening throughout the duration of the study, but we're really looking to collaborate much more closely with engagement with stakeholders, direct engagement with stakeholders, with residents, with community groups in the corridor. So they're not just heard as we go, but they're there along for the ride, and they kind of see the analysis unfold with us. That's it on my section. I'm actually going to pass it over now to my colleague, Cecily.
All right, thank you, Zach, and good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Cecily Taylor. I'm a senior regional planner, and I'm excited to share with you what we're planning for the Purple Line conceptual study here. So again, the Purple Line is this north-south transit line that generally bisects the urban area of our region here, lying to the east of the existing Blue Line corridor. And you can see this roughly follows the Interstate 805 corridor. That's one of our most congested freeways in the region. And when we're looking to understand who is using this corridor, we can look at, for example, census data. And just as one example, we've seen from that data that there's over 20,000 residents in the South Bay communities that have jobs either in the Kearney Mesa or the Sereno Valley employment centers. So that's just one example of a critical connection. There are many more that this transit line could provide, and that could give relief to the congestion on the freeway as well as the high demand on the Blue Line in the South Bay that Zach mentioned. And this project has gone through a few iterations over the years. To that end, I did want to have a point of clarification that in my staff report, I indicated that this project was first brought up by the Mid-City Community Advocacy Network. That is a mistake. It was actually the City Heights Community Development Corporation, a different community advocacy group that's based in City Heights. They're both great partners, but I did want to clarify the attribution of that group that first brought up this concept that is now the Purple Line. So flash forward, and the latest regional plan and the comprehensive multimodal corridor plans have recently identified that this project, which is 30 miles from end to end, would be best served by a fully grade separated high-speed passenger rail. And that means avoiding conflicts along the roadway by either going underground or having an elevated rail line. And the goal is to provide a really fast and reliable transit option for this corridor that could serve, as Zach mentioned, the dense communities and job centers along this route. And you can even see on this map how that differs from the Blue Line in terms of the station spacing to really try to achieve those fast travel times and compete with driving. So with this study, we'll be hoping to really refine the alignment that we have, understand from a high-level engineering perspective, what would it really take to realize this vision, and have a better understanding of where the stations could best be located to serve the neighborhoods identified. So I'll walk you through a few examples of the questions we're hoping to answer. Up in the north at Sereno Valley and University City, we want to serve these major employment centers. There's a lot of folks traveling there. We also will need to understand how we can connect with the existing coaster service that will connect up with North County. And there's also ongoing work being done to look at the Low-Send corridor in this part of the region. So we'll collaborate closely with that team to identify where Purple Line could tie in or complement that service. But to the south, in Kearney Mesa, the latest community plan has identified a desire to densify that area. It's already a major job center. So that's a great opportunity for us in introducing a new transit line. We'll want to understand how we can best serve that area and keep in mind that vision for the future. At SDSU Mission Valley, somewhat similar, there's an emerging development there to provide a really great new hub for housing, for jobs and higher education. The challenge will be to identify how to best navigate what is still an emerging development, how we can tie into the existing Green Line trolley at that site, of course. And then there's just the topographic challenge of crossing a valley with a rail like this. City Heights is one of those densely populated communities. We want to understand how we can best serve the real heart of this community and look into ways that we could tie into the existing transit that's, for example, served by the Centerline Rapid Route stations. And Southeast San Diego is a similar story there, a densely populated community that currently has the Orange Line service. And then in the south, of course, need to coordinate closely with Zach and his team as we look in serving the South Bay and making a connection to the folks crossing at the border, understanding how these services can complement one another and provide another option for folks who in this area who maybe don't have a destination downtown. So that's a lot to tackle. These are just a few examples of the questions that we'll be answering as we get this study kicked off. And really try to conceptualize what this project looks like beyond just a line on the map. We're getting started in just a few weeks now, and the schedule follows similar schedule as the Blue Line of developing refining these concepts, understanding the feasibility, looking into potential phasing and interim solutions, and then looking to wrap up in the end of the next calendar year, 2024 calendar year, with certainly outreach and engagement with the public and community stakeholders along the way so that we can receive their input and keep them updated, help them learn about this process and really be fully aware and engaged. So with that, we're happy to answer questions on both of these studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecile. I'm going to see if we can complete our entire agenda today, which means we want to leave at least 7-8 minutes for item number 8. We're going to go to public comment now, 2 minutes each, and we're going to have to close public commenters in terms of them any additional requests other than the 3 that we have. So, Francesca, can we have public comments for number 7?
Thank you, Chair. We'll start with the comments in the room. Dr. Bailish, you can. Oh, 8, I'm sorry. Okay, my apologies. We'll go to Steve Gelb on Zoom first, and Steve will be followed by Jesse Ramirez.
Good morning, Chair Hsu and committee members. I'm Steve Gelb with San Diego 350. It's wonderful to see Sandag moving forward with the studies of the Blue Line Express and the Purple Line. But the goalposts have changed since the 2021 regional plan was approved. In 2022, CARB raised its goal of VMT reduction from 1990 levels from 19% up to 25%. At the same time, SB 32 requires a 40% reduction of greenhouse gases at by 2030 as well. So the SANDAG goal of 19% VMT reduction right now is too low, and it needs to be raised to 25% to meet the new standard. We shouldn't have to choose between the Blue Line Express, the Purple Line, and the implementation of bus rapid transit. We need all of them. 80% of MTS riders live south of the 8. Most MTS riders don't have another choice to get to work and school. The Blue Line is a transportation lifeline, but it's too slow. It takes almost 90 minutes to get from one end of the line to the other. The Purple Line would relieve the awful congestion on Highway 805, but its timeline should be moved up by 10 years. We can't wait until 2050. Priority needs to be given to transportation projects in the South Bay, where the air quality is among the worst in the state. When will SANDAG take action to reduce the harm to the residents whose health is at risk there? The regional plan should include air pollution reduction goals and yearly measurements to track progress in communities of concern that currently are suffering with the worst air quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jesse Ramirez, who will be followed by Alex Wong.
Good morning. Good morning, Transportation Committee. My name is Jesse Ramirez, and I am the Community Engagement Manager at City Heights CDC. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'll try to be brief since I know we have a hard stop and another agenda item. So I'm here to express City Heights CDC support for both of these studies. We are really glad that SANDAG is taking action and moving forward with both the Blue Line and Purple Line. City Heights CDC, as staff has mentioned, has been calling for the Purple Line since the 90s, meaning that at this point, City Heights CDC and our community members have been waiting for nearly 30 years to get to this point, which is just a study. So I'm here to call on the Transportation Committee to take action. Our community members cannot wait until 2050 for the Purple Line to be completed, especially given the potential benefits that the Purple Line has. This project has the potential of completely transforming how people move across our region. By reducing this 2050 timeline, we can significantly reduce VMTs and meet, for example, the new requirement of reducing VMTs by 25% set by CARB. So let's give people viable and cleaner options to get to work, school, and their destinations. These projects, like the Blue Line and the Purple Line, can help us achieve this. The Blue Line is the most used trolley line. The Mid-Coast extension saw a 73% increase in its use since its completion, meaning that the ridership is there for both of these projects. So let's make them happen and let's not wait until 2050. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Alex Wong, followed by Carolina.
I urge SANDAG to think twice before building the Blue Line Express. Instead of building a rush hour only Blue Line Express that will only benefit riders at a few stations in South Bay headed in a peak direction, why not increase frequencies to 5 minutes all day in both directions, which will benefit riders at every South Bay and downtown station? Remember, frequency is even more important than speed because passengers perceive a minute of wait time as being equivalent to 2.5 minutes of in-vehicle time. Let's also implement full transit signal priority on C Street and Broadway, which could shave off 5 minutes of every trolley trip passing through downtown. In 2020, MTS wisely decided to double off-peak frequencies on the Blue Line, recognizing that travel demand was shifting away from peak hours and becoming more consistent throughout the day. COVID has only accelerated this trend. Building a peak hour only express would therefore go against this trend. SANDAG says an express might save end-to-end riders nearly 15 minutes of trip time, but if the express train comes every 15 minutes while the local comes every 7.5, passengers on average would wait 3.75 minutes longer for an express train, so in reality, riders would only be saving 11 minutes rather than 15 minutes. Out of the remaining 11 minutes of savings, about 5 minutes of it would be in downtown. But that 5-minute downtown travel time savings could be implemented simply with transit signal priority, no express tracks needed. That leaves passengers going from San Isidro to 12 and Imperial 6 minutes of in-vehicle time savings. But in 2015, only 15% of Blue Line AM peak northbound passengers were traveling from the full distance from San Isidro to downtown. The other 85% were traveling shorter distances, meaning any time savings from an express would be under 6 minutes. Finally, an express train will have higher operating costs than local trains. Compared to local trains, express trains will run faster, but will carry far less people per hour because they skip most stops. No wonder LA's Metro canceled its Gold Line Express due to low ridership. So once again, please increase frequency and implement transit signal priority rather than the Blue Line Express.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Carolina, who will be followed by Blair Beekman.
Good morning. My name is Carolina with the Environmental Health Coalition and the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group. I'm here to thank the staff for the report and also express excitement about this project's coming up, and also as well as a sense of urgency. Transit is a lifeline, and the Blue Line Express, the Purple Line, and bus frequency are all part of the 10 transit lifelines project priorities that have been identified by transit riders in the South Bay for the most part. And so we wanted to elevate the sense of urgency around the Blue Line Express. One of my coworkers recently was doing some field work, and he went to use the Blue Line at 4 a.m. It was packed. It was packed with workers that were going to the port of entry and to the downtown area. I'm wondering if anybody in the room has used the service at 4 a.m. It is very important to elevate that the Blue Line is providing service to a major job center, the port of entry, and therefore we need to prioritize the express service. I also want to elevate that the Purple Line has been, as mentioned by my colleague, Jesse, something that was prioritized back in the 90s. It is something that needs to be prioritized, and there's a need to implement the project urgently. And finally, the need for bus frequency. Right now, we're looking at a budget shortfall at the state level. And so we need to address connectivity and service quality as we also look at this budget shortfalls. And finally, all of this is connected to air quality and greenhouse gas emission reduction, which is a priority to the region.
Thank you. Our final speakers will be Blair Beekman, followed by the original draw. Blair, you can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Hopefully you can hear me, and thank you for allowing public comment for these items. It was very interestingly, a public comment offered the concepts of more frequency of service is the ideas of creating efficiency and speed, and it really helps in that process. It could be an answer that we don't necessarily fully need the Purple Line, but I'm interested in the Purple Line as a process, and really interesting words from the previous public comment about at 4 a.m. in the morning, the Blue Line was very full. So yeah, a real good luck on working on this issue and working out its study process. I hope in budgeting money for this study process that you really can be considering the concepts of drivers calling in sick and missing their routes. It's a very serious problem along the SDMTS line that I feel has to be addressed at some point. And that if we do address it, it really helps the questions of efficiency, time, and better service, and just an overall better morale that you guys have to consider, I feel, and I'm going to really have to make a point of it in upcoming public comment time. To conclude, with this upcoming bus line, trolley line, there's going to be new technology questions involved with it. I hope we're prepared in those new technology services that are going to want to be employed. And when we do, we have real considerations and arguments about that tech that will be placed. And if tech is placed that has, say, biometric capabilities, we have to be sure to have open, accountable practices for that technology and want to be able to talk about that openly and honestly. Do you want to talk about that sort of tech openly and honestly? We can. We have the ways to do that now. Let's do that. Thank you.
Our final speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like Blair was saying, I mean, you have the blue line and, do you necessarily need the purple line? I'm not saying you do or don't, but what it feels like you guys do is you have these things that you have in place and then they're not running the way they should, but you then move on to a whole other project to implement something to kind of mitigate the problems that these other lines are having. And so, I mean, instead of just like getting one of them set and being like, this is good to go, you move on to something else that may or may not be feasible. And your guys' whole carb reduction and greenhouse gas BS by 2030, the amount of time you guys take to do things like these are just reports. So, and it's taking over a year and a half. I mean, next winter, they'll be complete. And so how will you ever meet your goals of 2030 when everything takes so long? And how much would this purple line cost for it to either go underground or be above? Is it going to be something that, you're just going to be trial and error and we're just going to be spending like billions of dollars on this? For something that, how long is that going to take? It could potentially take 15, 20 years. And so you're not even going to meet your goals by doing that. So I think you need to think about, making the things that you have in place already better before moving on to something else that could potentially cause way more trouble and may not be the exact answer, because you're not necessarily getting to the bottom of why all the other problems occur. I just think you guys get your hands in too many baskets. So then you can't really be productive and do things that are always beneficial and that work. So, yeah. I'm done.
Thank you. That concludes the public commenters.
Great. Do we have any comments or questions from commissioners, committee members? Commissioner Moreno.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation and also for your hard work on this project. I especially want to commend Mr. Hernandez for your robust efforts at community outreach events in San Isidro. I just saw you at the 5K, the Casa Familiar 5K. So thank you so much. The Blue Line Express, along with the San Isidro Mobility Hub, are the two highest priority transit projects in our region right now. The fastest growing part of our region is actually in Tijuana and Baja California. So if you're in San Isidro and look across the border, you could see the high density development continuing to go up in Tijuana. And this means that there's no better return on investment for a transit project in our region than investing in the San Isidro Mobility Hub and the Blue Line. I think these investments are more and more important than any other project literally in the region because the number of cross-border commuters it's going to skyrocket in the next decade. So we desperately need to invest in transit solutions to convince a large portion of them to choose transit instead of driving. I think if we fail to do this, there's going to be no way to reduce vehicle miles traveled in our region, actually. And any reduction in VMT from other investments will be swamped by cross-border traffic. I know that we're still at the initial stages of this study, but I just want to make sure that this study will explore several key aspects of creating a Blue Line Express route. First, my question is, will this study examine what it would take to convert the Blue Line from light rail to commuter rail, at least from San Isidro to 12th and Imperial?
So that's one direction that we could see this process unfold. Basically, the first step is trying to decide, what does express level service look like? What are the operating times? How many people should it serve? How fast should it move? From there, we can work backwards and say, maybe on the high end, that means we implement, heavy rail, passenger rail, commuter rail. Maybe on the low end, that's like, let's try to squeeze as much travel time savings from the existing infrastructure. How do we streamline operations? Maybe at the medium level, that's like bypassing track. Maybe that's additional tracking here and there to make the corridor travel time smaller or shorter. So yeah, the idea of, commuter rail or heavy rail being part of the discussion isn't necessarily off the table, but I think there needs to be a range of options looked at.
Okay. Well, I would recommend, I would formally recommend that we look at that. And second, will the study explore grade separations for every road, every road crossing between 12th and Imperial and San Isidro?
Yeah, we're definitely going to document the necessary grade separations. And like I said, looking at a range of options, if we want to hit certain operational goals, maybe that does mean fully grade separating. Maybe that means grade separating here and there. Grade separation projects are already on the books. And so we're obviously going to document those and bring those into the equation. So yeah, that'll be a big piece of it.
Wonderful. Also another formal recommendation by my part. And third, will the study explore changing to the trolley car and station design to add more passenger capacity for each train?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a couple nuances to that. I mean, we still have to look at what is the infrastructure that we have available right now? How constrained is it? And if we, consider simply adding a different type of rail technology, a different rail vehicle, maybe that adds capacity. Maybe heavy rail is a bigger rail car, more people can get on, but you still have all the traffic lights. You still have the grade separations that need to occur. You still need bypassing tracks to tap into the full potential of what a heavy rail capacity could be. So there's a lot of technicality to the story, but definitely taking a note of that.
Okay. Fourth, will the study explore the effects of the Blue Line Express on vehicle miles traveled crossing the border? Or will the analysis, like so many before it, stop at the border and not account for the impact of this investment on the people who cross the border, Americans who cross the border every day as part of their commute?
Yeah, we're going to do our best to get our hands around that. Obviously, the cross-border demand is a major driver of the ridership that we have today. The tools that we have available to us to model that ridership potential, this will be kind of the first go potentially of using some of those tools to really model like an actual project, tapping into, latent demand potentially. So we're definitely aiming to make best use of the tools that we have. The tools that we have aren't necessarily perfect. I mean, no modeling tool is. You can't really predict the future necessarily, but we're going to do our best for sure.
Yeah, Council
Yes.
Member, if I may, just to remind the committee members that last November, we released a request for innovation concepts. We received 18 bids back. We chose 3. One of the 3 chosen was Cordova Corporation that's looking into extending the Blue Line into Tijuana. And part of this work will be looking at that. So it would require to do a model like CBX, but for rail. The other thing, your other questions are really legitimate. I think you're going to define performance objectives that you want to achieve, and we're going to look at the ways to achieve them. So for example, when the staff say we want to reduce the hour trip from the border to downtown from 1 hour to 25 minutes, I don't believe you're going to achieve that without grade crossing every crossing, and sometimes having to go underground, and sometimes double tracking, triple tracking. That's going to cost money. So I'm sure at one point you're going to say, that's too much money. But if you want to do it right, all the things you point out has to be considered before moving forward. As to the extension into Tijuana, I think our partners in Baja California are very interested. We are interested too. The companies we chose are willing to put their own money into these concepts. And so we're working with all of them to do that.
Got you. Thank you. And since you brought up Hassan, I think that we have really 3 different discussions, right? We have the San Isidro Mobility Hub, which I think is the most important in our whole transit system. The project, the cross-border project that you just commented on, and also the Blue Line Express, right? Which I think these are all, these are all great, but I think they should be separate conversations.
Sure.
And so, not to dilute the conversation, but I'm going to move over to the Purple Line. And obviously, sorry, Mr. Hernandez, our office is always there to anything you need, right, in regards to this study. I have always been supportive of the Purple Line and will continue to be, but not at the cost of the Blue Line. The presentation that you showed was a little shocking to me because the South Bay was just kind of bundled into one area. So that tells me that you have spent more time looking at the stations that will be in the other parts of the city. So I would just, and I know that's the purple line, but continue to be supportive of it, not at the cost of the blue line is, I guess, the final statement. But I thank you, Zach, for answering my questions. I appreciate you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing the study as it proceeds. Thank you, Chair.
Any other? Yes, Mayor Krantz.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating to have a hard stop on this issue. It's important. It makes me wonder, when did the board approve the study? And did this committee have it on an agenda? I'm kind of new to the board.
Mayor Kranz, these were early action priority projects in the 2021 regional plan that the board adopted, and they were also funded in the budget that the board adopted last week.
Okay, and so it's surprising to see that we're starting it the summer of 2023 and it's concluding in late 2024. How will it inform our RTP process if it's going to be done that late?
We'll take information from the studies and incorporate it into the 2025 regional plan. But keep in mind, this is very early preliminary planning, conceptual level planning at this point. So any of the work that's completed in time to be incorporated into the draft transportation network for the regional plan will be.
And as an MPO, we are not a transit agency, and these services are a big part of the MTS service area. And have they done studies similar to this?
We do the planning work, and we coordinate very closely with MTS and NCTD on all of our transit planning work.
Do they have any plans that they've studied, any studies that they've done on this particular
MTS
line?
actually provided us funding for the San Isidro Mobility Hub work that you were presented on, and they are very much involved and at the table in the planning efforts.
In slide 3, there's a reference to dispersed origin destination patterns and make choosing which stations to serve with Express less obvious. Yet in the bullet points of activities in the study, there's no origin and destination study that's identified. Is that actually a part of this study or not?
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, it was just a bit too much detail to fit on one timeline slide, but yeah, looking at ridership patterns, origin destination patterns is one of the key components of trying to decide what stations to serve. So that's definitely part of it.
As a resident of Encinitas, the Losan corridor travels through our city. Amtrak, the Pacific Surfliner, does not stop in Encinitas. Passengers in the station are told through an announcement that a train can travel through without stopping. Is there really a reason that we need to have a separate line for each of these stations that are going to be bypassed, as opposed to just using the existing lines and announcing to the passengers that may be on a platform that the express line is on its way through?
Yeah, you're kind of getting towards the thinking behind what an express service might operate like. And yes, we have infrastructure that serves, between the border and UTC, almost 32 stations. So trying to get our heads around what does an express level service look like? It will include, skipping some stops that maybe exist today that'll still serve non-express Blue Line service, but you're definitely getting towards kind of the nature of the work that we're trying to embark on.
Yeah, transit that has, the focus on transit lately is on how far can people travel in a certain period of time. So the notion of express is an important part of that. When somebody's live, can they expand the territory which they can work? And so this is critical study, important to make sure our service expands that as much as possible, whether it means the morning and afternoon commutes, evening, night commutes, assuming shift work. So it's really important, this study, especially as this impacts the urban core. And that needs to be, I think, the most important focus that we have as a region is how to improve transit to the urban core. So thank you.
If there aren't any other comments, we're past our hard stop at 12. So I want to thank both Zach and Cecile for your report. I think we're going to come back with this again with even more discussion, especially as how it applies to the next regional plan. So this was information that we don't have to take any action on it. For item 8, we'll have to table to another meeting. My apologies to Alan for being here and sitting through our meeting, but not being able to present until next time. With that, I'm going to Oh, we have any public comments towards the very end here. And with that, I'm going to go to 1 minute if there are any.
Thank you, Chair. We do have, excuse me, one public comment. Blair Beekman, you can go ahead.
If this is on North County issues, I will simply dismiss my public comment. Sorry for the trouble. Thank you for the meeting.
Thank you, Blair. So with that, we are going to adjourn with our next Transportation Committee meeting scheduled for Friday, June 2nd at 9 a.m. We are adjourned. Thank you. Other meetings, there's public comment at the very end for those who did.